let's jump in real fast and just make sure we touch base on the chapter from Deepak Chopra's book, 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. Any takeaways, any questions, comments, concerns about the writing, the sharing, anything anyone want to share? Epiphanies? Yeah.
So I guess, I don't know if I think I spoke like, I don't remember which month it was, January, February, about untethered soul and how moved I was by it. And then like this came into my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like this is the greatest book that's ever been written. Like every single chapter, I feel like, oh my gosh, wow, I needed that. And so this chapter in particular, in terms of obviously what you guys have been telling us, teaching us, sharing with us, it's just so simple. Like you have a desire for something, whatever that may be. And that's wonderful and awesome and amazing that you can visualize that or put it in writing, but without intention or attention. It's just there. It just exists. It doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't happen. And so these are things that like, I think most of us know or knew, our whole life, but I like to say these guys are like Kool-Aid and people who understand what they're saying when you go to their class, even like years ago, when you guys would teach classes. I mean, seriously, people, I think, listen to you all, obviously.
I hope so.
Even before you guys really, I think, even maybe knew what you mentioned it when you were teaching today, John, about how you guys wrote stuff down and then you went back a year and a half and looked at it and then you were like, oh wait, let's pay attention to that a little bit.
Yeah.
So, it's very true. I think it's like the people that you hang out with, you become like those people.
Yeah.
People that you choose to spend your time with, what you choose to give energy to is what you will become, what you will share, what will emit from you. So I just think that it's very simple. And I wish that like the two of you could create some 30-minute something that you could share with the entire world. Seriously. Like
We're working on it.
All age groups, kids and teenagers. And because I just said to my daughter who is at home not having a great day, she's 17, and I just texted her right before we started saying, I wish you could be here. She said, I'm just not having a good day. I said, did something happen? She said, no. Well, I could have been here this morning. You would understand that it's a choice to be happy. And it seems so simple in this book.
Yeah. What we pay attention to magnifies. That's it. Whether it's positive or negative, it magnifies. We see more of it in our life. We draw those experiences into our life. But if like, to your point, if kids could understand this information, we're not taught this in school. We're not taught some of the most fundamental, I say teachings, but it's not even teaching. It's the most fundamental things that we need in life. We're not taught about like money. What point in your education were you taught how money works? How money works? If that, right? Maybe, but just basic common.
That's what I'm calling Kool-Aid. Y'all's Kool-Aid. It's like seriously. It's very powerful.
Yeah, we're not taught about law of attraction.
It's really simple, but it's so powerful.
Yeah. The challenge to kind of speak to why like your daughter and all of us have these days, and what's happening is like through this and you being kind of immersed in this experience over and over and over again, and you maybe you've noticed like there's some like core like common thread truths that we're just talking about in slightly different ways every single time, like the truth for who you are, the reality that we have a choice, present moment awareness opens up that ability to have that choice, and what you do with that moment is actually a function either of the past or a product going to be a product of your future. Like that's basically what we talk about every single time, all the time. But it's important to understand what we're up against is a lifetime of conditioning in the contrary to on the other end of it. In fact, most of us, this is why it's so simple. I mean, it's like, oh, what I put my attention towards grows in my life. Let me put my attention towards the things that I want in my life. Okay, let's do that. And like, it's so simple, but why it seems for a lot of people like a Herculean effort, if not impossible, is that we've been conditioned to think the opposite. And this is why you hear the ego sees things 180 degrees from the truth. Like, what does that mean? Well, it means that, like in this instance, we think we have to attain the thing, the experience, the relationship, the money, the whatever, to get the feeling we're looking for. And because life is life and it's impermanent, the thing that we attain then changes or goes away or deteriorates. And because we misinterpreted what we were looking for as this feeling as being attributed to having this thing, when that goes away, we suffer. And then, so like, my point is like on little levels and big levels, this is what's happening all the time. So like the first thing that has to happen is we have to hear a concept that's different. Oh, wait, no, you can actually have a feeling, and the feeling is what attracts the thing into your life. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like, I have a very specific goal around service and around finances to become financially free, period. Where it's not really true, like passive income doesn't really exist. You got to work somewhat for it. There's like, I'm not just going to sit here and do nothing and get like all this abundance. Like you got to put a little effort into it, right? But my point is, I want to put the least amount of effort to be able to get that bigger reward. And you can set stuff up like that's to John's point. There is actually people who have done this, but you don't get taught that in school about the truth about how money works. Money follows value. So create enough value, and then if you just present that to the world, and all of a sudden money will happen. Like, my point is, if we don't understand it initially, so we got to understand it first. And then this is where we talked about the levels, unconscious unskillfulness. Like, so this is again right back to, I think we've talked about this like 8 times and every weekend, a couple times a weekend. But this is what this is the hurdle, is that where people are asleep, thinking that they need the thing to experience the feeling. And again, my point behind the whole financial freedom is that I know this is what I want in my life, but I'm also not blinded by the fact that when I get it, it's going to change in a way that I know it's just going to happen. So I can't tether my identity completely to those things. That's the problem. We've completely tethered our identities to things outside of ourselves, which by the nature of the world will change. It's impermanent. And if we do that, we suffer. And then we start suffering for things we don't even know why we're suffering, but it's still an identity thing that happens. And then think about identity. Think about how long you've been who you are, or thought you were who you are.
I think for our age, my age anyway, but I look at like my girls, my 17-year-old, so she, this is what is probably a lot of her problem.
Yeah.
Because she's constant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, there's like what, 8 apps or something that they have to check it nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's why she never texts me back.
That we bring is that you are a teacher. You're their teacher. And you can share that book with them. Like my kids are young, and what we do is we pick up the book and we'll read it aloud and we'll talk about it. We can teach them those things that they can't learn from their phone, their friends.
I do. But
I know they're
I don't
17
listen,
and 20.
right?
Yeah.
They know already.
No, they do. No, honestly, she does.
To be this stage again. No, totally right.
And they do. There's actually an Anna Quinlan book, A Short Guide to a Happy Life. I give that to people all the time, and both of my girls read it.
Yeah.
My 17-year-old asked me, she asked me a couple weeks ago, she goes, will you read that with me again? So no, there are moments, trust me, there are definitely moments. But it's still it's for me to say to her, desire's not enough. You have to give it an intention and attention, because trust me, I've said it. She looks at me like, what? And then I say, I'm telling you, it's a daily practice. And they're both like, it's not fucking yoga. I'm like, no, it actually is. And then I'm like, you know what, forget it. Okay, y'all go do your thing.
And then too bad you didn't have a beer.
Yeah,
But that's a challenge.
I mean, it's-
That's a challenge of, I mean, you know, it's a challenge of anyone, whether it's our kids or just our
That's right.
family,
That's right.
of, you know, to talk about to have these ideas, these bigger concepts that actually help us create more ease in our lives. People in our lives are going to easily say, well, it's just because you're into yoga, so that's all yoga, it's just a yoga thing. It's like, no, it's actually not. It's a life practice that can change everything, totally change your reality. Just so happens that yogis were teaching it way back before religions were invented. Like they were like, in fact, every major religion that's ever fell into this earth under whatever guru it was, like Jesus, for instance, he didn't say, hey, I'm starting this thing called Christianity. Come on, guys, let's do Christianity. You know, he was like, hey, here's a practice that's going to revolutionize your life. I'm not calling it anything. This is what it is. Follow this practice. And then Christianity fell underneath him, right? That happened with Buddha. It happened with every master who's ever walked the planet, right? They were teaching concepts that allowed us to end our suffering. That was it. Allowed us to end our suffering. And so you think about, you're 17-year-old, how much suffering they're creating, right? Yeah, but we're all doing this all the time, right? Aren't we all doing this? Like, so for instance, I was telling Allison, I think, Allison, she may be on there. So I was telling Allison after, right after we broke, that I think it was Tuesday. Yeah, it was Tuesday. So Tuesday morning, I came in and Chris, I think you were about to teach. Did you teach Tuesday morning? Right before Chris was about to walk in and teach, he was like, "Dude, did you hear that that the governor's probably going to shut us all down and bring us back to phase 1?" Right? And then he goes and teaches. And I was like, "Oh,
Really good." I channeled into because sometimes that shit is like, oh no, what is real? Okay, that's crazy. What's real? And then I'll channel what's real into the class, and that's what happened.
This is the beauty.
I thought it was great. I don't know,
guys. It's the beauty of teaching also. Like, what you get from your practice is also what you'll get when you start teaching classes. And when you teach, it's like it's a meditation. It's you're dropped in, you're focused for however long, and you've got to be focused because you're delivering, right? It's your service. You have to be present with the people that are in front of you because you owe it to them, right? As a good teacher, you got to drop in and be with them. So every single time I teach, it's that I get the same experience as you guys get when you practice, right? Every time. It's never not happened. I come out of class, I'm like, whoa, that was so awesome. Like, just the feeling of it, just the presence, right? So I was pissed from that moment all the way up till about 2:30 that same day, thinking that this is what was going to happen. Well, come to find out, it was somebody Chris talked to right before class that was actually in class that works in the restaurant industry, and he heard from somebody else that blah, 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 so on and so forth. 2:00 on Tuesday and Thursday is when the governor was doing his regular speeches about updates about what was going on. He didn't do it that Tuesday, and he didn't do it we found out he wasn't going to do it on Thursday. He based that, literally, it wasn't true. It was just hearsay, right? But I allowed myself to get caught in the drama of that and torture myself into this, all of the ideas of what that meant from 9:15, 9:30, all the way till 2:30. And then realized, oh, that probably wasn't true at all. And I just gave my peace away to it. All my peace gave away for almost the entire day, right? And then at 2:30, I was like, oh, that's probably not even true. It's probably just hearsay. So let's get focused on what we have to do now. Let's get clear on what's going on right now, right?
Did you guys fight after we got out of class?
No, because that's his shit, not mine.
Yeah, that was my shit. But this is my point. This is my whole point. Whether we're 17 and you guys remember when you were 17, right? Your whole life was your friends and what they said and this and this and this and this and this and this. And now at 17, they have access to a phone that allows that to magnify. But we were still doing the same shit, right? There was days you were just depressed or down just because you're a teenager and your hormones are flying all over the place, right? It was just what it was. But we still do the same shit is my point. We still do the same stuff. We get caught up in these dramas and allow ourselves to give our peace away to all of it. And the true teachings are what all of this is about, what yoga is about, what every master has taught is that we can end our suffering. We don't have to get caught in these dramas that don't exist. It's Mark Twain's quote. He said, I'm an old man and known of great many troubles, most of which never happened. And the whole idea behind that quote is that our mind makes up most of our trouble. Our mind does, right? The percentage of actual problems that we have in our life is very small. It's very small, right?
Yeah, I like that part in the chapter about the imaginary obstacles being 90% and the remaining 5 to 10% of like the actual obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and just put it into perspective, which I do, is you literally make it up in your head.
Yeah, we're telling
We all
ourselves
do.
horrible information that's totally based on like no fact whatsoever.
Damn inner roommate.
In a roommate, right? I
roommate.
mean, and it's giving you all this great advice that is categorically wrong or just misguided because it's based on its own past and its own perception. It's not seeing accurately. How many times do we make snap judgments over people? Snap, boom, asshole. You don't know that, right? You're driving and like they slightly swerve into you and you're like, you piece of shit, right? Like, what? Whoa, they just had a moment. They didn't even like endanger you. And all of a sudden you're questioning their existence, you know? Or we see someone and we just like look at them in a way that's like, oh, they're probably so-and-so, right? Like almost 90% of the stuff we tell ourselves is just wrong. It's a lie. It's not true. Oh, so I have to have a conversation with my wife. Well, she's probably going to say it this way. She's probably done this and that. And that's why I do this. Like you just start just rationalizing lies to yourself. My point is, this was someone who told me something that I just said, hey, so-and-so who works in the restaurant industry, as if that gives him more credibility, right? He could literally be a dishwasher. I work in the restaurant industry, right? Like, okay. But I was like, John, just so you know, this may be coming down the pike. You should know because I don't want to suffer alone, right? I need to give you some of it.
Yeah,
Right?
Hold on to this for a little bit.
Yeah. I'm gonna go get present, and I just want you to make you hold that for me. But you see what I'm saying? Like there was not. I believed something, or I don't know if I even believed it, but at some point John decided to believe it, at least to the degree that he wanted to think about it for a long enough period of time. You guys, this is my point. This is what's happening all of the time. This is our reality. This is why yoga at its heart is like the way Buddha phrased it was an end to suffering, because we just get to see it and then just detach from it and be like, oh no, that's not reality at all. Not even a little. It's just all just made up. It's all just made up. And remember, your brain, because of the negativity bias, is designed. It's designed. That's how we survived. It's designed to focus on the negative. It's designed to think about the worst case scenarios, designed to hold judgments upon people because of who you think they are, not at their best, but at their worst. And all of a sudden, because you see someone at their worst, they're forever at their worst. No, it's not true. It's literally all just lies. But the power of it is once you see it, you get to detach from it. Once you detach from it, all of a sudden you can be free of it. And then it's just a practice of detaching from it time and time and time and time again. This is the informal practice of meditation, of just seeing the thought that's crazy and coming back, and literally dropping it. Just drop it. You don't need to wonder why or how it happened or where it happened or what part of my life would ever give me that thought. It's crazy. You don't have to analyze crazy to be free from crazy. You just got to notice the shit's crazy and then drop the crazy and move on about your sane life, you know? But this is what happens with a lot of people. They start diving into it and understand, I got to dismantle, I got to understand it. No, you don't. It's crazy. Your brain is crazy. Your mind is crazy because your brain is crazy. And we can just drop it and then move on and be present and then focus our attention on, how do I help? What can I do now? What do I have control over? What's acute right now in our society is there's so much uncertainty, so much uncertainty. Like anyone know what's going to happen in a month? No idea. No idea the nature of what our world is going to look like in a month. Uncertainty breeds fear. What happens when people are afraid? They need to attach and hold on to shit they can control, right? And we try to do that in a number of crazy ways. But the point is, right now is the time to practice like hard, like the informal act of it every day, all day long, and to be on guard for your attention. Literally, the battlefield of the mind is what's happening right now because there is such widespread anxiety, uncertainty, and fear that's in our society. And my point is, it's so easy to then just assimilate that into your own experience. And all of a sudden, you just feel everyone, especially an empath, like you feel other people, like acutely you walk in, like the people that walk in and say, here I am, and other people that walk in like, there you are, right? Empaths are like, oh, there you are. How are you feeling? So I can gauge exactly how I should be with you and understand you. And it's not about me, it's about you, right? Like that, you're feeling that on a mass level. And so if you feel anxious, most likely it could be your anxiety, but it's this cultural anxiety that's happening. All that to say, you got to practice yoga. Not necessarily on this, but practice yoga on this, and then practice yoga as you're walking around your days. And then you get to share it with your friends, your family, your loved ones. And I look at that just like dropping seeds, just throwing seeds, and like in my mind, they're like, eyes are closed, and they're just like, they're just getting pelted by like these seeds of wisdom in their face. Eventually, they're going to be like, oh, look at this thing. And then you water it. Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's pull out something to write on, something to write with.
Elizabeth said, real quick, hasn't there always been uncertainty? I think we have just persuaded ourselves that we used to have more control over our lives, but we have never had control over the externals, and it's just so much more visible now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Well, to Elizabeth's point, yoga's been around for, I mean, they predated 5,000, 6,000, but even if it's half of that, even if it's just even if it's 3,000 years old, it's older than that, but just say that, like, the reason it was created is for the same exact thing we're dealing with right now. That many years ago, you think, well, what did they have to worry about 5,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, right? A little more life or death, right? A cold goes around and people are dying. Like, we're really dying from it. My goat runs away. I don't have like one harvest, and all of a sudden the whole village is like starving. Like, that's some serious stuff to worry about, I would think, But the idea, even way back then when it first started, the idea was the same. It was to end our suffering. And it was to help people live a better life, because we were still caught in the same patterns of consciousness, still caught in the same thing up here, right? Creating these dramas out of not necessarily true information, right? Half truths or whatever it was. We were creating all of this intensity up here when the reality was different, right? 90 to 95% of what the intensity was all mind-made. That was happening way back when. It hasn't changed. We're still dealing with the same stuff. Still dealing with the same problems, right? Different details, but same stuff. Now I got to pay my mortgage, and I'm worried about work, and I'm worried about, all this, mask and not mask, and COVID, and this, and all this other stuff, and protesting, and like right now, right? All this, the craziness that's out there. Like, we get caught up in it all, and it becomes these intensities in our lives. But if we were really to look at it, at our lives specifically, there isn't, most of the time, it's not that much intensity. Even if we're dealing with a specific problem in our life, like, we can deal with the problem in our life. And I'm saying this from part of, I'm still practicing this, right? We can deal with the problem that's actually going on, but then be at peace the rest of the time that we're not dealing with what's going on. Does that make sense? Right? Like the other day, like, I didn't have to let that get to me. If I was really practicing right then, it wouldn't have even been a thing. And I could have saved it all the way up till 2 o'clock when the governor was supposed to go on, and then see what happened, see what the reality was, right? I didn't have to get caught up in all the drama of it. I did, but I didn't have to. And this is the point, right? I had hours of drama going on here that, guess what? Didn't even exist. Wasn't even real at all. It was just total hearsay, right? So the point is, we're doing this all the time. 5,000, 6,000 years ago, they were doing it. We're still doing it to this day.
To Elizabeth's point, it's always the case. It's all the way. Like, we don't have control over all this stuff, but it's been so put in our faces with this current situation. And never before have we had such access to information so quickly on such a wide scale. we've had that for a while, but like in history, if you look back, like there was never that. I mean, you wanted to communicate with someone in Europe, you had to send a letter, right? How's the things getting there? You're getting on a boat, like literally, I'm going to send you a letter.
Weeks.
In 3 weeks to a month, you're going to get the letter, and then you send it back. We can send a text message and get a response in a second, and what took a month or 2 months to do a correspondence back and forth.
Mhm.
So I think it's two things. One, yes, what's being exposed to us is actually, we really don't have control over our lives. And two, we're now exposed to so many people who are so freaked out because of the access to information.
Well, and I think too, like the access to information also can, like, piggybacking on that too, is in the world that we're in, like you're used to like instant gratification, you know, like Amazon delivery, or like, well, it's like not there like 6 hours later. So for me, like, it's so easy to get answers to your questions. You just go to Google, you know, get it instantly. So to just like sit and like let things be.
Yeah.
Like, can I like prime this or something? Like
Mhm.
figure it out quicker. So that's like an addition to
Yeah.
like, not only just like the overload of information, but
Yeah, there's
The hypervigilance, right?
Yeah,
I should be doing something right now.
like instant.
Yeah.
there's a comedian that was like, yeah, I'm like, forget Amazon now. I want Amazon pre. I want to be sent shit before I need to know it. You know, like it's needed at my door. I don't have a thought and it's there.
And that like
Classic.
probably will happen.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so at the top of the page,
Thanks for jumping in, Elizabeth.
at the top of the page, vertical, so write down vertical stabilization. Give me just a very, very brief description. Like, what would you do with the feet? Really brief. What would you do with the feet? What would you do with the legs? What would you do with the pelvis? What would you do with the core? I'm actually giving you the answers right now. What would you do with the side bodies? What would you do with the shoulders? There are two parts to that, right? The upper arms and the shoulder blades. What would you do with the head? And then what, here's an important one, what does vertical stabilization organize? It organizes the blank of the blank. Yes, and so that, and then just tell me the two forms of energy that we talk about. Two forms. You don't have to give the three sub forms right now, just the two forms of energy that we talk about all the time. And then what do they organize? And then the last piece is 7 lines of the body. You don't have to do a description or anything else, and you can even just use the letters. LL, and blah, blah, blah. There's one of them, got one of them. And then what do the lines of the body organize? That's it. Mm-hmm, that's it. Okay. All right, how was that? Good? Yeah? What? So let's cover it real fast. So feet 3 to 5 inches, heels behind second and third toes. Get the corners of the feet to ground, spread them out, feet are done, right? Legs, shins forward, thighs back. Pretty simple. And obviously, I'm going to go quick through it, but there's obviously little details to it. Engage your thighs, no lock of the knees, blah, blah, blah. Pelvic bowl to neutral. Sealing the core, pelvic floor, pit of the abdomen, lower ribs. Side bodies, lengthen them. Shoulder blades slide onto the back. Triceps wrap. Line of the jaw pulls back. Vertical stabilization, right? So if you had something similar to that, really what it comes down to is when we ask you that is, can you describe it to somebody, right? Could you teach that piece? That's important, right? Whether your focus is stability classes or flow classes, understanding vertical stabilization is vital, 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 vital as a teacher. It's the blueprint of all poses, right? What does it organize? Form of the pose. All right, so vertical stabilization organizes the form of the pose. Cool. 2 forms of energy. Muscular and organic. Muscular and organic. And then what do they organize? Right effort. Right effort. They organize effort of a pose or right effort in a pose.
Does that make sense? Think about like, I got to engage or I got to relax. That's the amount of effort you're putting into it. So vertical stabilization, what do I do with my arms, legs, how to, in relationship to gravity? It's the form, like I'm literally moving my body to form my body into the right position to stabilize myself in relationship to gravity. Does that make sense? And then now that I'm there, how strong should I be and how relaxed should I be? It's a question of effort.
So and then the muscular is more integration and the organic is more expression, is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
But it still has the same question of the right amount of effort.
Yeah, so if you look at, remember the conversation we had, John was saying on, it's like a dial. Here's muscular, here's organic, and you can slide the dial one way or the other. Rarely, I couldn't think of an example right now, would I want to be like completely muscularly or completely organic, right? In any pose, there's always going to be some balance of the two, but you get to choose where you slide that effort meter to one end or the other. But it's still going to be a question of how much effort am I putting into it. Now, the full story is when you're stabilizing yourself vertically, there's some effort involved in that. But it's more related to how I'm positioning the physical body. And now that I'm in the right position, how effortful do I want to be in this position? There's a little bit of that effort inside of vertical stabilization. Does that make sense? I mean, for instance, when I pull my ribs down and pull my low belly in, right, that takes effort for me to do that. But that's more like a question of, how do I optimize my relationship to gravity in any pose? Once I'm there, now it's a matter of, do I want to hug in and move out of depth and not go so flexible, or do I want to relax and work more of the expressive, flexible aspect of it? Does that make sense? That's why I don't want you just like put organized right effort without understanding what we're actually saying with that. It's literally how strong or how flexible do I want to be in this experience? And that's totally your choice.
And then as a teacher, what your perspective is, how do I, after I get through the basic body positions of a pose and all the details of that, right? Basic body positioning, how to modify, how do I deepen, deepest expression, how do I exit, all of those main pieces of teaching. Then it's, okay, do I teach something along the lines of vertical stabilization? Do I start to get into depth on how to organize the body? Or do I move towards energy? Do I try to teach them effort, basically? Where should they be engaged? What's their foundation? And where should they be expressive? What's opening? Where are they moving towards, right? It's basically that. As a teacher, we're like, okay, what do I pick to teach? We get through the basics, and then it's, okay, do I want to teach more of effort? Do I want to teach more of form? Do I want to teach perspective? Which I don't know if we talked about yet, but we will talk about that at some point. Does that make sense?
What do you always say? Strong like a tree, but flexible like bamboo. What is your little
Tree sway. Most teachers say.
Yeah, in tree, they'll say, don't worry about swaying, tree sway. It's been a long time, Denise, since I've used that one. It's something like an oak tree and bamboo or something like that. Yeah, something like that. I can't remember. So 7 lines. Arm lines, lateral lines, functional lines, superficial back, superficial front, deep front, spiral. Right? Got them all? Everyone get them? If you didn't, if anything that we're talking about is not what you had on your paper, it's so important to write in what the correct answers are. It'll highlight it in your brain and it'll help you remember it for the next time. Right? What do myofascial lines organize? Sequence or therapeutic vision, methodology. I also accept methodology. Right? So it basically organizes the methodology that we use. How do we sequentially move through the body as we're teaching, as people are moving through their practice, right? We go from superficial to the deepest, moving from outward to inward, right? Cool. Okay.
Questions?
Questions on any of that? Any of that? Any questions on the Zoom?
Questions?
Guys good with that? We're going to ask you that for the final weekend. We're going to ask you that information. Everything we're quizzing you guys on is exactly what we're going to ask you. There's going to be any surprises. We're going to say, hey, what is it? Organize. Probably, like, I think if I have to look at the syllabus, so like next weekend's probably the other quizzes. So yes, so starting right now. But you guys, you know this stuff, right? So we're going over it, and we do the same quizzes every weekend now. You guys have heard it over and over again. And we'll just ask you that on the very last session.
Let me ask you this: do you know it? How was that? Right? You would have passed.
Yeah, I didn't get 100.
Yeah, it's okay. We're not asking you to know all, like, we're not asking you to like write it down like John would write it down, but just to know like the gist of it. Yeah. Cool. How about you guys? Everyone do good on that one? Yeah. Sorry, I looked down. When you see me looking down, I'm looking at you, although you're there. Good? Okay, cool.
All right, sweet. Let's, you know what I want to cover before we jump into that?
Yeah.
Is orientation and proportion.
Okay.
Because we hit tension compression last time, but we didn't get time to go over orientation and proportion. So let's cover that first, and then we'll jump into movement and postural functions. Okay. So, guys, let's we're going to take a moment to continue with anatomy. So last session we did with you guys, we covered compression and tension, right? So it was a whole piece. We basically went through every major joint of the body. Okay, perfect. Thanks, bro. Appreciate it. We covered all 8 major joints of the body and talked about what tension is versus compression and how important it is to understand that as a teacher, right? And so obviously it's important to understand it in your own bodies so you understand the uniqueness of your body, right? What is tension and what's compression? What does it feel like when you're dealing with tension, depending on the pose or the joint of the body, as opposed to compression, depending on the joint of the body, right? Do you guys get with that? Questions on any of that? I know it was a lot, but it's extremely important. So, any questions on Zoom? You guys good on the Zoom room? Tension, compression, feeling comfortable enough with that? And obviously, you know, as you like, the cool part about that is when you're moving through your practice, when you're practicing and doing poses, you can get a sense of it. When you start to hit any restrictions, you can immediately ask yourself, and you should, is this tension or compression? If it's tension, you're going to feel it in one area of the body. If it's compression, you're going to feel it in the opposite area of the body, deeper in the joint, right? And the elbow is a great example. If it's tension, I'm going to feel it here. If it's compression, I'm going to feel it here, right? And that goes for all the major joints. So what we want to jump into right now is proportion. So the other big factor in our practice that's going to come out for you guys, and obviously for your students is proportion. So we all are unique in our proportions. Like some of us have longer legs, some of us has longer torso, some of us longer arms. Right? That's really it, I think. And or shorter, right? And the proportion could be you have longer legs and shorter arms, a longer torso and longer arms, whatever the proportion is. But it's going to make a dramatic effect on the poses and what they look like and also how they feel, right, for you and your students.
It's important to know, like, when we're talking about like short arms or short upper torso, we're not saying that in an absolute sense, because you having short arms doesn't matter. It matters in relationship to your torso or in relationship to your legs. It's super important that because you could have long arms, but having long arms doesn't mean anything if you have a super long torso. If they're matched proportionally, and it all is dependent on the pose we're talking about. So don't get wrapped up in like, oh, I've got like T-Rex arms and that's bad. No, it's not. It's just in relationship to your torso. If you're trying to put your hands down in this position, if you had shorter arms, longer upper torso, it's going to be hard as hell to get your hands down to the mat. In fact, if you get them down, so we're going to talk about why and all, like, what are the ramifications of all that. Does that make sense? It's really important that we're not saying in an absolute sense that your arms are short and that's why you can't do it. It's your arms are short or long in relationship to your torso or your legs. And that's why in this position, you're struggling because of that proportion specifically. This is super important because if we don't, it's the same thing with like tension compression, because we're so unique. This is another aspect of your uniqueness. You have a unique proportion in relationship to yourself, arms, torso, legs, head, even like humerus bone in relationship to how long my neck is for forearm balances. Like that's a proportion thing that if you didn't know, like, holy shit, I can't do a forearm balance. Well, your humerus bone may not be long enough to pass the top of your head because your neck in relationship to your humerus bone, like this is stuff you'll never, like, where else other than a yoga training would you ever have that conversation? Or have you ever even heard this before? But it means a lot when you're trying to do a forearm balance and you're like, I can't get my head off the ground unless I completely arch my neck. And that doesn't feel good. What proportion is also going to do is give you that sense of like, oh, because of this proportion for me and my body, this is why these poses do or don't work. And very rarely is it going to be, oh, I got to throw that pose out of my life because my proportion doesn't fit it. Typically, there's something we can do with blocks or straps or some addition that can make most poses accessible. That is one, though, very specifically, where if you have trouble with that, like this thing, this elbow does not go above, if it's way below, and even if you elevate the clavicle and the scapula way, way up, you can't get this elbow to pass it, you can't do a forearm balance, you're going to be in a headstand. Does that make sense? But the whole point of the dissertation is it's all in relationship to yourself, not to anyone else. Cool.
So a great example of this is like a jump through, right? If your hands are down on the floor and you try to jump your feet through and come to your seat, some of us won't be able to ever do that simply because of proportion. Our arms are shorter compared to our torso and our legs, right? So kind of to that point, let's all come onto your knees for a moment. And we're going to just test proportion here. This one isn't necessarily a jump through, but it can be. So we're going to sit on our heels, our shins down. And what I want you to do is just straighten your arms all the way to the floor and try to touch your palms down to the floor. Touch your palms down to the floor. And just look around and see where everyone is.
Don't round your spine at all. Okay, this is really good. So, sorry, Zoom people, you're going to have a hard time looking at this, but I'll just let you know. Ben, look at how far away Ben's is, his hands from the floor. And then look at Marianne's. All right, you see the difference in that? You're like, oh, it's only a couple inches. A couple inches is miles in yoga. Miles. Cool. Who else? Yeah, Gigi.
Can people touch ever?
Yeah, some people
can help.
some people have long enough arms and a shorter torso, or long arms in relationship to it, and their palms are almost flat. Yeah. This is going to be it's going to be the best example. We're actually going to have you come up and do this next bit. But go ahead.
And so you can see if I were able to get my hands all the way down, right? So we're gonna, Ben, we actually have you come up and do it for a second. But check this out. What is this gonna mean? Like if I wanted to press up from here, right? If I want to just lift my legs up, in order to press up, I would have to round to get my hands down, right? Well, I need core strength. I need to round to get core strength in order to actually do that. But I have to already round to a certain point just to get my hands to go down, right? So that's going to take some of that out, which makes this difficult, right? As opposed to, and you guys will see the difference. So if I go here, I'm a couple inches off, but if I allow myself to go down, I'm already rounding, because side view of it, you guys see inside. I'm already coming down to here. And in order to press and get my knees to come up, I'm there, right?
Do you see what's happening in his torso? So go just upright for a second. He goes hands down, torso has to go forward, right? He has to flex. What has to happen for him to get his knees lifted is more flexion. You see, he came forward more, engaged more to ground the hands. What you'll see is someone whose hands are elevated higher, they use all of the flexion they have, all of the strength of the core they have just to get the hands down.
Which makes it really difficult to get the legs up, right? But if I make the floor come closer to me, right? Using blocks. Now the floor is 3 inches, maybe 4, right? Is that much closer. Now all of a sudden, and then so now look, I don't have to round it all, right? And now I have all of that rounding ability to be able to pull my legs up.
He didn't get more strength. We just changed his proportion. That's it.
Something to play with pro at all? Like two? Kind of like.
It'll depend not so much in this one as far as, because this is arms in relationship to upper torso, but there is a proportion that will happen in crow, but it's more so like length of femur bones in relationship to length of humerus bone when you bend the elbows, because that's really what has to happen. And then also you have taken into consideration inflexibilities. If you're like hamstrings or back line, your hips are tight, then you're not gonna be able to flex as much. And if that's limited, it's gonna all affect it.
I feel like you like kind of did, I don't know, describe something in the breakdown video that you guys did. I think in like the lab.
Yeah. I forget what it was. If it comes back, I'll key in on it. Ben, you want to come up and check this? So will you come up and do the demo for a second? Yeah.
And do the meditation after.
So yeah, just come up and John,
I do the same thing. So it'll just be the same thing I just did. So we're gonna start bending on his knees, and so with an upright spine, he puts his arms straight down and tries to touch the floor. You guys see how high his hands are, right? And so what that's gonna mean is when he goes to put his hands to the floor, it's good to put your hands to the floor. Notice how much he has to already round. And now press and try to get your knees and your lower body left. Right? You guys see that?
For him to be able to do that takes so much strength. It's crazy the fact that he can still do it with how much he has to work just to get his hands down.
So we do the same thing that we did with me, but put the floor. So we do a floor lift for him, and now watch what happens. See a difference? It looked like all of a sudden he got stronger, didn't it? Right? All of a sudden, boom! It came up. Right?
Yeah. Now, with that, now try. Do you guys just see what he just did is a pickup and a jump through, just like a jump through and then a pickup. Try it without the blocks.
So we take the blocks away.
This is the point, though. It
was what I was talking about with a jump through before, right?
Yeah. It's not happening. It's not happening. Not because he's not flexible enough, not because he's not strong enough. It's only because his proportion doesn't fit that movement perfectly.
And then we'll end on a good note. Let him do it one more time through. And so he got that. So now it's even, he went a little higher with it, right? Back through.
Strength was always there. Flexibility was always there. We just accessed it now because he elevated his hands. Nice.
All right.
Yeah, strong. Good stuff.
Thanks, sir. Now cartwheel out. Handstand back to your, walk on your hands back to your back. So you guys see the proportion, right? How much proportion can come into play in our practice, and how just simply shifting our proportion can all of a sudden give us strength. Not really, but the strength is already there, but it can shift our ability to do stuff. Right? So let's look at, so you'll see it also in like, in our twists, like so this is femur bone in proportion to torso. So some of you, when you come into a twist, your shoulder is here, and when you twist and put your hand down, it'll be kind of dead center, maybe a little forward of your thigh, right? But you'll notice when I do this, I'll do real. If I were to do that, right where my shoulder drops is forward, so my thigh isn't proportionally is shorter compared to my torso. My torso is longer, right? And so in order to hit a twist, when I'm doing a twist and my arm comes down, I have to go back. You guys see that?
See the angle of the arm?
I have to pull my arm back in order to catch this leg, in order to create the leverage for my twist. Right? Some of us, because of our proportion, our femur bone's longer in proportion to our torso, and we can just drop it straight down from where the shoulder is. Right? Neither of them are bad. It's just simply, what are we working with, right? What are we working with? And so in order to shift specific poses, we have to understand that. Here's the bigger bigger lesson with this is we can't look at somebody else's body when they're doing a pose and think that that's exactly how it's done for me. Does that make sense? I can't look at somebody doing a twist and say, oh, the arm has to drop straight vertical down to do a twist, because that won't ever happen for me, you know? Right? I will never get the leverage off the outside of that leg in order to get a deeper twist. I have to pull my arm back. But if I don't understand proportion, I may think, oh, that's wrong. I'm doing it wrong, or I'm wrong for some reason, right? Or I can't, like, for Ben, I'm kind of the same way with jump throughs. I always use blocks for jump throughs, right? There's teachers out there who say that's wrong. You're just not practicing hard enough. You're just not doing it hard enough. Bullshit, right? I'm built in a specific way that my feet almost always hit when I jump through, and they always have. Right? For a long time, I was like, I just got to work on it. I just got to work on it. I just got to do stuff to get better, to get through, and it never happened. So I just continue to use blocks. Right? So the point is we gotta understanding. It's just like tension compression. Understanding proportion allows it frees us. It allows us to say, okay, I have a unique expression of my body, and I have to adapt it to the practice, not the other way around. Right? I can't force my body into positions that my body will never do because of my proportions or because of tension compression. Does that make sense? That's the bigger takeaway from this.
I've mentioned this to Marianne before, and maybe I've said it out loud, but so good friends of mine, one in particular who I practice with relatively often, when I told her I was taking this class, you know, her response was, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. You'll be able to like do all these postures and poses, and I was like, no, that's not what it's for. You know, I'm still like, I actually prefer stability class. Just maybe it's out of habit, a habitual thing. Yeah. Same thing over and over. But she still is saying to me after a class, after a weekend, she's like, oh my God, what'd you learn this time? I'm like, I don't know, myofascial lines and joints. And she's like,
how to be still.
Like, yeah, you know, still, you know, and she thinks that it's like about the Instagram photos.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
It's true.
Sort of interesting. You know, I'm sure that as teachers, there are people in your classes that you maybe see or can tell that that's what, you know, in terms of expression. I guess that's what it is. You know, it's just their organic energy that they're choosing.
It's interesting. It's the challenge. No, exactly. Like, so here's the balance of it. We have these bodies, and we have this practice that allows us to express and explore our bodies. It's what it basically comes down to, right? We get to play. We get to, handstands are fun, and press-ups are fun, and all that stuff's fun. But it isn't enhancing my life. It may be enhancing me physically, right? But when it comes down to it, if I'm chasing that stuff, it's not dramatically affecting my life. Great example. Chris and I have spent years and years and years and years perfecting our practice, getting really good at press-ups and fancy shit, right? Handstands and scorpion handstand, all that stuff, right? If we were to have said or have been taught that isn't as important as sitting still and meditating or working on personal development aspects of the practice to actually have a better life, we would have a better life, right? If we were to like have worked as hard as we did on our practice on the other aspects of our life, we'd be on a whole different level, right? But what's confusing for people, and why your friend is saying that, and why people come to the practice and with that perspective, is that it is all about gymnastics. It is all about performing. It is all about doing crazy poses and the next crazy poses. And people think, I'm going to come to teacher training. I'm going to learn how to do press-ups. I'm going to learn how to do handstands. Like, I'm going to learn how to take my practice to a whole different level. We can teach you that, but what's going to really make a difference in your life, and what's hard to explain to your friend, what everyone gets caught up in, even people that come and practice at the studio, to take our class all the time, right? They get so focused on, I don't want to say it's the wrong thing because it's fun, right? And you can develop your body in that way and play with it, to whatever level you want to take it. But not losing sight on really what's important. It's what the practice gives us. It forces us to be present. I'll get to you in just a second. It forces us to be present with the moment. It forces us to. We have to be, right? We drop into the physical expression of being, of moving our body. How does that feel? Do I need to adjust it? Where's my breath right now? Can I focus on my breath? Can I be with the moment? I mean, you look at it you look at our practice as a training ground for life. When you're stuck in a pose, especially when you don't really like, right? When I make you do a chair twist and then go to the other side right after, you're like, fuck, John, stop it. My legs are burning already on this side. Now I got to go to the other side. Whatever pose it is, and you breathe through it, you let yourself be with it, present for it, breathe through it, that will dramatically, radically change your expression of living, how you're with a difficult moment, waiting for the doctor to call after an exam, waiting for speaking to your husband or your wife, speaking to your kids. Those moments are the moments that we are training on our mats, right? The difficult ones that are intense, they're like, I got to have a talk with this person. I don't want to, but I'm going to do it because I know what it's like to be in my center in a difficult situation because I've practiced it on my mat so many times. That is what we're doing, right? Whether I can do a handstand or not honestly doesn't matter. Whether my practice gets there or not honestly doesn't matter. The fact that I'm showing up day in and day out and being with the intensity, being with the tough moments of my practice, breathing through it and feeling it, noticing what's triggered in my mind as I'm doing it, right? The thoughts that pop in. How many times did you guys cuss me out in your mind today? A couple of times. Denise, thank you for being honest. Eight, right? You're like, fuck you, Joe. Right? There were times where like, right? What? You just call a third set. There's times where that happens, but if we notice that, right? We notice that and we stay present. Oh, I am, I'm lost. Oh, you may come back. That's really what's going on in that. But how do you describe that to somebody that looks at Instagram and think that's yoga? How do you describe that with a friend?
I want to be in my life what I am on my mat. Like I want to take this out there.
Yeah.
That's what it's a daily practice. It's like I try to tell my girls, I try to tell my parents too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it's hard to tell people that.
But that's really what we're doing, right? That's the key, Jacob.
I wanted to hear out of personal experience. I know you guys have been doing it for like 20 years. It's like, and you grew up with your parents meditating, but when did you guys actually like really start getting that aspect for yourselves? A lot of us here are like maybe newbies of yogis, where you guys have been practicing quite some time. It's like, when did that really trigger for you that you're like, it's not about that physical aspect as more as it was like a meditation plus the physical? Like, when did that really hit for you guys?
We were lucky enough, I think, when we went to teacher training, there was one of our teachers. He was Jim Borsellino. He was one of the main teachers, one of his assistants, and he was big into that side of it. He had a rock and practice, but he was into he was a part of the Self-Realization Fellowship, Paramahansa Yogananda's teachings, and Chris and I we hit it off with Jim, and he invited us to go to the SRF center that was in Florida there, and there was something that just clicked for us. And we were like, all right, we want to be part of the Self-Realization Fellowship with this, and we connected with Paramahansa Yogananda's lessons and got involved in it and just and studied that like we were studying the physical practice.
Yogananda, real quick, just history. You guys have a frame of like who he is in relationship to what you guys are learning. So we have stability and we have flow, right? Niyata and Vinyasa, two different lineages. Vinyasa comes from Krishnamacharya, who taught Iyengar, who taught Pattabhi Jois, who taught his son Desikachar. Desikachar came up with yoga therapy, big thing going on, like you become a registered yoga therapist. Pattabhi Jois and Iyengar eventually taught people who then linked together and they created what is like Vinyasa, like, currently-ish. On the other side, Niyata, stability, Vishnu Ghosh. You guys heard us talk about Vishnu Ghosh, right? He was on a different part of India, developed a whole different style, different experience because of where he was, and because he was also a big weightlifter. His was like the form of stability was born from his desire to craft the perfect body. That's what his mission was. Vishnu Ghosh's brother his given name was Mukunda Ghosh. That's Paramahansa Yogananda. So you have one brother who took the asana, the physical aspect of yoga, and ran with it. And you had the other brother who said, all I want to know is God. And he ran with it in the other direction. So just so you know, like that's part of like what formed our understanding and reality of how we view yoga the way we do. We were influenced by Vishnu Ghosh, by Krishnamacharya, and the lineage of people who they taught. And then Paramahansa Yogananda was the name he was given by his guru. And then he created the Self-Realization Fellowship. There's one in Encinitas, and there's a bunch of little centers all around the country. Anyway, the Self-Realization Fellowship is all about, like, it's meditation. It's Raja Yoga. It's like the simple act of sitting on your butt, meditating, and doing these techniques to help you realize your truth, your sense of self. Is that helpful? Just so you have an idea of like how this links together.
Those 2003 we started that. So so to directly answer your question, Jade, it was there was even with us doing that in our physical practice, there was a strong push, and like one of our main teachers in the beginning had a strong push into the physical practice. And what we kept on bumping up against, guys, was that when we pushed harder on the physical side, we would find ourselves getting injured, and then we'd have to take time off and heal, and then go back at it, and then we'd push really hard and get injured again, and there was that cycle of it. And we got to points. So Chris and I had discussions about what is the end goal. Like where are we going? Like what is it to be able to do handstands at 100? You know, to like continue to have that high level of physical practice at a late age. And what we started realizing was it wasn't important. What was more important is that I could be physical at my later age, that I could continue to surf, that I could continue to roll, to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I could continue to play with my kids, I could continue to be strong, flexible, and feel amazing in my body, regardless of whether I could, continue to do handstands and do all of that stuff. So there was this, all of a sudden there was this a shift of priority. The priority really quickly became not pushing so hard in our ability to do the physical feats of the practice, but to continue the consistency of the practice so that I could feel amazing in my body. I don't know like date wise when that was, but when we first started, we were going full blast in the meditation side of it through the lessons, and we were going full blast in the physical side because we were approaching it the same way we approached martial arts. And martial arts, we wanted to be as good as Bruce Lee. We wanted to be like top martial artists, in that. And then so the physical practice, we ran just as hard when we started getting the physical practice. We wanted to be as good as we could be in that. And then it just shifted. It just shifted. I don't know how many years it was or when it was exactly, but it was like, no, it's more important to feel good. Age will kind of do that to you too, right? I mean, you're like, listen, like I literally would have injuries that, when it was, honestly, now you think about it, it was probably around when there was a time years into it where I ended up having a neck injury. And the neck injury was from martial arts. It was from, when we do mixed martial arts, we do a thing called, it's from Muay Thai boxing. It's called the plum, where you grabs the back of somebody's neck and you can control them. There's a Filipino martial arts called Dumog, where you can actually do the same thing with different parts of different limbs. You basically control somebody. So we were doing that all the time. So you can just basically, Chris would grab the back of my neck and whip my body around all over the place, right?
While in between throwing elbows and knees, and then taking them down and choking them out.
And then in jiu-jitsu,
I did that to him more than he does me.
and then jiu-jitsu, when you're fighting, you have to fight off your back. It's called guard, right? And you fight off your back. You'd have somebody, whether it's Chris or 250-pound like ox of a man stacking you. And so you're in guard and he's like pressing up and you basically get your whole body right here. It's like doing a shoulder stand, except you have a 200-pound man on you, right? like on your legs and you're trying to tap them. But, and so I ended up having a neck injury that just lasted forever. I mean, it was a year of neck pain. I was still rolling, still training for a good portion of that. And then I went to the doctor and ended up getting an X-ray. The X-ray looked fine. But you have to get an X-ray in order to get an MRI. I went to the doctor, was like, I want an MRI. Like, well, we got to do an X-ray first. I'm like, all right, do an X-ray. And that didn't show anything. And then got an MRI. The MRI showed 2 bulging discs in my neck. And it was at that point I was like, okay, I got to lay off martial arts. I got to stop this for a while and just focus on yoga and heal this. And once I dedicated myself to that, I ended up healing my neck.
Do you guys still practice martial arts?
Yeah.
BJJ. Yeah, obviously for the last 2.5 months we haven't because of obvious reasons, but yeah, it was typically prior to that, it was once a week we would get in and roll. Yeah.
Mostly with Chris and I would mostly just roll with each other because we can manage the level of intensity. A lot of times you'll roll with people that don't know how to manage the level of intensity, and then you gotta match their intensity, otherwise you'll get hurt. So it ends up being a little more difficult. But
and I'm a teacher at heart, so like when I'm working with the lower belt, I'm like, oh, you can try this, and then do that. Like as we're rolling, I'm like, oh yeah, check that. Oh no, do this, and then do that. And it got to a point where then he would be in a better position, and I'd have to like fight like crazy to get out of it. So now I'm like, sorry, dude, this is not your help day. Like, I'm going to clean you up, and then I'll talk to you afterwards about what you did wrong. But it's an important question, and because when you go off from here and teach, it's part of the flack we get from people that practice consistently with us at the studio. I think it's more newer students who have practiced other places is like you guys don't change it up enough. Like there's not like you don't do hard stuff. Like I go, there's one comment. I go to this other place and their like beginner class is harder than your level 2 class. And I'm like, good. But look at what John just said. That's not why we're doing this. We understand that's an aspect of it and it's a valuable aspect of it because of more so equally what it does for the body, but I would say potentially what it does for the mind, right? Like when you're off your mat and you just move and breathe like consciously, synchronously for the last 60 minutes, how you feel after that, crazy valuable. That's our high water mark, not being able to do crazy inversion arm balance and wrap yourself up. Like it doesn't, because at the end of the day, that shit doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So this is, and my point is that why you're learning what you learn, why we teach the way we teach is because we have a very specific goal with what we're doing on our mats. And that goal is to be healthy at 100. That's why we do it. That's why I don't give a shit if I do binds or don't do binds. That's why I don't care about teaching it because, so I'm inwardly rotating and then extending my shoulder and I'm going to do that as I bind and then put weight on my arms and like, for what purpose? You know, okay, occasionally we'll play with it and like see what it's like because it's fun. But like my point is most people do that as if that's the end result is that experience and that will not give you a better life. I wish when I like mess up at home, my wife's upset with me. I'd be like, but baby, check this out. And like press up into a handstand and she'd be like, oh my God, I love you. And you're forgiven. It doesn't happen. It doesn't. I've tried it before. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Because she takes my leg out.
Or your arm.
She sweeps my arm out when I'm doing it because she's a ninja. But you know, like that's my point. It's like that doesn't do what it could. Like where I learn how to be with her is on my meditation cushion. Is in the moments where I am struggling in a pose and I realize I'm trying to push too hard. And I've got this identity wrapped up around this next level that I think is going to make me feel better. And I decide not to. And I see it. And I've gained awareness and insight into a way of being that I now can see off of the mat when I'm relating to my children or my wife or my brother or whatever it is. You guys see, like, that's the value of it. And the reason I really want to highlight is because this is what we hope how you go out and teach is like, yeah, we can play, but let's not get lost. Let's not get lost in it. Let's have fun, but let's remember why we're really doing this and the real purpose of it. It's a great question because that's how we've organized why we do what we do. And why we get flack from people like, yeah, it's not hard enough. We'll go someplace that is hard enough. It's okay. We love you.
I feel like we get caught up in that whole, like, not we, because I mean, I used to love doing the level 2 classes, and they were fun, and you guys always made them feel like play and like fun, and it was exciting to see, oh my gosh, I'm after time 45, 48, and my body can still do this. That's exciting. But I do know people who are just so into the advanced postures, and I think it's also a creation of the culture that we live in, and a performance mindset and competition mindset, and I think maybe that's where the disconnect is with some people, because while it was fun to do those things, it didn't take the place for me of just a great 60-minute stability or flow class that was just like floating out of the studio at the end.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
And you think about like on an Instagram post, it's way sexier to have somebody tangled up in their entire body, you know, like a pretzel on a post like somewhere, than it is to take a picture of me doing this. Right? Someone sitting in meditation, you can only look at so many of those and be like, oh, that's cool, that's cool. You know, it doesn't get the same traction in this social media world we live in, you know, doing the craziest poses and taking a picture of it, and that gets more attention. So obviously the whole,
Why are we taking a picture? Do you need that attention? You're looking for that gratification outside yourself again.
well,
How many people like that?
yeah, totally, Jade. And but
Conversation that you're having about it, like, are we treating posted? What reason? The right reason? Or your reason?
yeah, but it shifts what, you know, the bigger point is it shifts the industry that way, you know, or people's perception of the industry anyway, I should say. And the industry too. That's why you have these studios. They're like going, like their easiest class is like our level 2, right? Not sustainable, right? That's only going to last so long before they go out of business, unless they change what they're doing. But it shifts people's perception of what yoga really is, which is a damn shame, because if they think it's all about doing pretzel shit, then more people will not do it, as opposed to letting people realize, and this is my hope for you guys, is helping people to realize that it is the oldest personal development system that's ever been created, and it's still around for a reason. It changes lives. And if they can understand it, that the physical practice is simply there to help you feel younger in your body, but even more importantly, to still the mind, so that you can eventually learn to sit in meditation, so that you can shift your entire life, so that you can develop better relationships with everything, your spouse, your kids, your food, money, sex, whatever the thing is, you have a better relationship with it because you understand it through presence. That makes sense, right? That is what we're really doing. And that, as a teacher, is what we got to, through the yoga practice, because that's the entry point. People get in, they want to do a practice, but you guys are going to be able to teach a really kick-ass yoga practice and drop pebbles of wisdom about what's really going on, how it's really changed your life, and what you've done to experience that shift. Because people are not going to respond to what you tell them; they're going to respond to the stories you tell them. Right? That's how we change belief. Right?
So check this out. Let's all take a seat. This is why we do proportion. Then bend the knee and just see, because it's femur bone in relationship to upper torso, because that's what's going to give you the ability to either have to curl back. I'll do it this way. So all you have to do is pull this heel tight, bring your arms behind you, and just see how high up this femur bone is going in relationship to your shoulders. And then just look around and you'll see the varied differences. And now, to get a better sense, put your arm on it and you'll see the angle. Some people are going to be straight out. Some people are going to be slightly angled down, right? Mary, slightly angled down.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Some people, maybe. No.
Beth is pretty high up.
Yeah,
I'm not
Beth's
high up like you are,
Susan's
Chris.
high up.
Susan's high up too.
So what this means, check this out. And there's going to be slight anomalies from one side to the other, right? If you do this, again, the arm is just giving you a sense of like what is that angle to give a more bigger visual. Some will be, yeah. a lot of times that leg length discrepancy is also tightness of the QL. QL, like these low back muscles, will, if that one's tight, it'll pull up and it pulls a hip up. And so all of a sudden what looks like a shorter leg is actually just a QL tightness, interestingly enough. So then we'll go just knee down. And then, so same thing, this is what just happened. Here, right, this is what we just did. And now you're just gonna try to cross over. See how I can go straight down right to the knee? And some of you, you feel it, you're like, wait, I've got to curl and go backwards just to get my elbow to the knee itself. And some of you are like, what are you talking about? I can put my elbow anywhere. In relationship, for you, yes, your torso is long in relationship to your femur bone. So that means you have to pitch way far forward, right? Which brings your shoulders way far forward, but your femur bone doesn't correspond to that amount of length, so you've got to go back to get it. Does that make sense? And you can try the other one too. Everyone good on that? Again, this is just proportion. There's like more different ways of playing around and checking proportion than we have time, but I just want to give you, the idea is to give you a couple experiences so that it opens your mind up to asking the right questions in the right poses. So you can try it on the other side. It's basically, it's going to maybe slightly different, but most of the time it's going to be the same. Okay, so why does this matter? Because you'll hear us say, engage the core, lengthen the side bodies, and then rotate. Yes? And when you rotate, I know you've heard this say this, some of you will shorten that left side rib cage as you twist to that side. And if you can lengthen that back out, do so. Some of you can't lengthen it back out because of proportion. But you still want to work towards that idea without fighting against yourself. Does that make sense? So if I'm here in a twisting triangle, when I rotate, naturally this happens. That relationship that I just showed you isn't in play right now because I'm not having to cross over a bent knee. My femur bone isn't in play. My legs are straight, right? So once I have that proportion, this is the thing. I'm just showing you in a different pose so you can see, oh yeah, that happens naturally for a lot of people just by virtue of I'm twisting to that side, my hip comes this way, and my body goes that way, right? So this is what you want. That's still true when you're here, but some of you are going to have a harder time doing it because of this proportion. All that to say, don't fight yourself. You're not potentially injuring yourself to get here, but just don't try to, because if you go way long, your elbow is going to pop off just because you can't get it there without going back into yourself. Does that make sense? Again, it can as far as this is concerned. So you may go back here and then extend here just to help. Now I'm exaggerating this because I have the range of motion and the proportion to do it. But some of you still, it'll help lengthen it back out, but it may not keep you from having to flex the trunk to get here, right?
Or maybe your students.
Yeah.
So a lot of this may come into play if a student comes up and asks you, hey, whenever I do this twist, I can't, and you're saying, get your arm on the other side. I can't quite get my arm on the other side without having to round my spine. What do I do? And so then you have exactly, so let me see. And then you say, oh, you'll see that their proportion is what it is. And then you can give them technique from there, right? You can tell them, okay, do this. You can just bring your arm back, you round a little bit, or you can place a block here, or do this, or this, or this, right? So this is real, for you guys, it's important, but also understanding it from the perspective of a teacher and having students ask you about, hey, what do I do here? Or they may say, I see this pose is done this way. I can't do it. And you're like, all right, let me see you do it, right? That's usually what, so I can't do it. Well, okay, let me see. So you guys good with that? That's proportion. So let's look, so that's proportion. Let's look at orientation for just a moment. So orientation is basically our body position in relationship to gravity. So orientation is our body position in relationship to gravity. So we're gonna do this. This will be pretty quick. We're just gonna take three poses, all the same pose. We're just gonna shift the orientation to gravity, and it'll be a different experience, right? So, do you want to do this, Chris? Or me too?
I can do it.
Okay. So let's take bridge. So check this out, guys. So we're gonna do three poses. We may have actually shown this already, we're going to show bridge, we're going to show camel, and then we'll show
Bridge, bow, and camel.
and bow. Okay, so so this is bridge. Chris is going to reach down, touch his ankles. He's going to bend the elbows if he needs to. So he's in it already, but
And just for continuity's sake, I'm going to keep my hands here because that's where they're going to end up in the other poses.
okay. So
roughly in this position.
So look at this position for just a moment, and you're going to see this position. We're going to just change the orientation to gravity. So in this orientation, he has a lot of surface area for gravity to hit him, right? This is a more muscular experience in that he has to press up into gravity. Does that make sense? He has to press up into gravity to create the back bend. It's really hip extension because his shoulders and head is grounded, but you guys get my point. He could, I actually said this today, he could place his hips into his hands for a moment. Right, and if you were to look at, we're going to look at camel, and this would actually be one of the positions for camel, also grabbing the feet. But if he were to do this, this becomes more organic in that he now can rest his hips into his hands, and so he's not using muscular strength now to hold his hips up. Now he can let his body rest across the fulcrum point of his forearms. Does that make sense? Right. So this is a more organic experience. He can technically go deeper here as far as the opening goes, the hip extension goes, because he's not having to use muscular energy pressing it into the sky. But really the key here, and what we want to show, cut your ankles again, Chris. What we want to show is orientation of gravity. This is a more muscular experience. This is a more difficult to work a back bend out of. You see that? All right. So then let's take a look at floor bow. Same positioning, guys, right? Almost exact same positioning, except a different experience to gravity now. Now gravity is a little bit less surface area. He's able to use muscular energy to create the back bend. He's able to go deeper into the back bend on this one. He's not fighting gravity as much, right? His legs are going that way. His body's going this way. Gravity's hitting him right here, like that, and it's less gravity pulling him into this pose.
And I've got more leverage because of my legs and the strength they have to kick back.
So now we're going to take him and just set him up this way. Same pose.
Or if that was.
Yeah, if you were supporting, same pose. Catch him that way, same pose. Now he has less surface area for gravity to hit him, right? His hips can go forward. Also, when like in specific positions, gravity can all of a sudden become an aid in moving into his back bend, right? So if he's here, gravity can now hit him as he's going back, as opposed to when he was on the floor and he was pressing his body to work the back bend into gravity, right? It was harder for him. Now gravity's actually helping him move in the direction of his back bend. Do you guys see that? And so the key here, guys, is all the same pose. Feels completely different because of his relationship to gravity, right? And so we feel this. You guys know this in your practices all the time because of your position, right? Whatever position you're in, right? You have a specific relationship to gravity. I'm going to talk for a long time. I'll leave Chris in this pose. You have a specific relationship to gravity depending on the pose you're in, right? And it even can be the same exact pose, but just shifting it to have a different experience. Make sense? Cool.
Oh, maybe. No, I'm very sensitive about batteries now. We lost it before. We're good.
Yeah, I think we're good. Cool. Anybody on Zoom? You guys good? Questions on Zoom? You guys all right? Does that make sense? So questions about orientation? Cool.
It's simple, but it's one of those things where tension, compression, proportion, orientation have huge parts to play in your experience of poses. That's the bigger gist of it, is once you understand those on a conceptual level, and we're going to dive deeper into, we talked about the tension compression, but we're going to talk more about myofascial lines to get a bigger understanding of what they're actually doing. But then granularly, it's like, okay, I have a unique body. How am I unique? Tension, compression, you have the way your joints are structured, the length of your bones, length of connective tissue, all unique to you. Length of bones in relationship to length of other bones, proportion, all unique to you. They're going to totally dictate how you feel in poses. So this is the real value of it. This is, in my opinion, the most valuable thing is you then have a gate that opens to not making yourself wrong for how you feel in poses. You have an opening where you stop fighting yourself in certain poses because now you have an inkling that maybe, just maybe, it's the way I'm built. Maybe it's my proportion. Maybe it's tension, compression, why I can't go deeper, why that person looks the way they do and I don't. I look at people doing advanced poses and I can be like, oh, they can get their feet to their head. Look at it. Look how long their legs are. That's it. That's crazy. It's awesome. But you have long legs and you have crazy spinal extension. Oh, spinal extension meaning I have more space between the bones of my spine, which gives me this ability to back bend, and it looks marvelous. But I'm like, oh, that's what you got. And let me know how that goes for you when you're 90. You know, like back to why we do what we do. But this is so, so important because it should unlock an ability for you to make peace with your body and your practice. Because the reality is, it's yours. It's you. It's no one else's. Looking at someone else as if you should be doing that is like reading someone else's autobiography thinking that it's your own. It's not. That's their life. That's their story, how they do poses. You start accepting and experiencing what your life is like and how you do poses, unique to you. That's the real value of tension, compression, proportion, and orientation is thrown in like, oh yeah, by the way, we have this thing called gravity that's affecting us. So why does like one pose feel harder or like more effortless than another? Typically, it's just how we're relating to gravity. That makes sense? Questions?
Let's do one more example of orientation real fast, and we'll do it together. This will be real. It's real, extremely simple. So everyone stand up. All right, so feet 3 to 5 inches apart, heels behind second and third toes. And then lift the arms up in front of you and bring your palms forward. And hold this. Close your eyes for a moment and hold. I want you to feel where gravity's hitting you and what starts to feel a little heavier. All right, so then open your eyes and come into plank. Come to plank.
No.
No, I will not. Come into plank.
That was the collective energy. No, John.
Exactly the same pose, right? As far as the body goes. You're doing the exact same thing, minus maybe a little bit of flexion of the toes, maybe, right? But everything else is the same as you were just doing, right? Yeah, you can stop. Now, turn around, light on your back, or you can come through, or however you want to get through. Now, light on your back.
Get some blocks, Ben.
So light on your back, and now send your arms up towards the sky as if you're pressing your palms into the ceiling. Activate your feet in kind of the same way. Heels behind second and third toes, feet about 3 to 5 inches apart, so we'll get it real similar to what we just did. You could probably stay here all day. And what you'll feel, right, so you're feeling your palms, you're feeling gravity on your arms, you start to make those subtle little adjustments to align your arms to gravity, where you can find your gravity line, right? You can find your gravity line with it where it comes a little bit more effortless. You guys see the difference? Same exact body position, guys. Nothing, you didn't change anything except your orientation, right? Your relationship to gravity. This one, you could probably hold for a long time, but eventually your arms would get heavy. Plank, right? You would hold a lot less time before you felt really heavy. This position, you could probably hold for an hour, right? Just find that alignment. When you were young, you ever do that? You put your arm in the air and try to find find gravity, right? You find where it felt almost effortless. It's kind of that. Right? You find the perfect position of your arms. Does that make sense? So same thing. So it's kind of obvious, but it's important to understand, especially what the point Chris was making is that when we understand the relationship between tension, compression, proportion, and orientation, we can free ourselves. We realize that we're unique in specific ways, and that if I do something, it may not necessarily be that I'm not strong enough or I'm not flexible enough. It may simply be proportion. It may be that gravity is hitting me in such a way that it feels off in my body, so I can shift it and do a different pose that gets me to the same result. Right?
Chris, what was the point that you had just said before we all stood up? You said the poses that feel effortless to us are the ones where something with gravity. Can you say that again?
the larger point, I can replay it. I don't know what I said. The larger point was to make peace with your practice, because sometimes when you're in a pose that's challenging for you, it's not that you're it's not that you're deficient in flexibility or strength. It's may just be the way your body's made, essentially. Was that what you were going with, or was it more with orientation?
Like the poses that do feel effortless. More in line with that. Is it? Yeah. Is that?
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay, yeah.
And it's just exactly what John just said, from like going from here to here to here, way different in the amount of effort. And when you align with gravity, and basically, and you can call it a long bone principle, when you align the long bones of the body with gravity, talk about mountain pose, what you've done is you've diminished the amount of gravity and how much of an effect it has on you. And because you've aligned in this, the long bones, the shin bones, the femur bone, right? The spine, if you call that a bone, but obviously made up of multiple ones. When you position the long bones to gravity and align them, by nature, the bones do the work, which means your muscles don't have to.
Right. Gotcha.
We're not saying be totally relaxed, but we're saying in certain poses, when you align the body right in relationship to gravity, this is what I said, it can be more effortless because of your body position.
Gotcha.
Okay. Say we can stand mountain pose and it's with least effort.
Yeah.
Because you're aligned with gravity.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. The way your body's designed to be.
Or if you were to take a forearm balance, for instance, if I had my elbows go wide, then I just lost the long bone principle, right? If I can keep my elbows underneath my shoulders, my forearms are then stacked, which allows me to use less muscular energy to hold myself there, as opposed to being here and my elbows splaying out wide. Now my shoulders are floating, right? They're floating. My forearms are now at an angle. It requires me to use more muscular energy to stay integrated and safe, but to hold myself in that position. That goes for all poses, right? If we align ourselves to gravity in a specific way, it helps us to use less, we can use less muscular effort to hold ourselves there. Right? It's the same exact thing as if I stand in mountain pose, it's less effort than if I stand in a strongman position or a turtle. Right? I literally have more gravity hitting me here now, and this is actually harder to do. What we bump up against is people that have been doing this for 20 years, and that feels normal to them. Whereas they come into this feels awkward for a time being because they're just not comfortable with it. It's the exact same thing of being in a bad relationship. Right? You're in a bad relationship long enough, it feels too comfortable. You don't want to done. You don't want to be done with it, right? That's why we get stuck in bad relationships, because it's more comfortable to be in a bad relationship than it is to break that shit off and date again. Fuck.
Because
right?
it requires effort to get back to a place where you are in alignment. And that effort, when you look at it, means there's some work to be done, and that's a tough thing to do. So you'd rather, I'd say, no, I'm good. No, I'll be okay here. No, thanks.
Yeah. So there's symbology everywhere, guys. So I'll leave it at that. We guys good with that?
Let's do this. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll go into what we had planned to talk about when we go into proportional orientation. So we'll just take like a quick 2-minute break, 2 to 5 minutes.
Don't let us start without reminding me that I'm muted.
Yeah.
We may just have to do that.
Just like only the break. Is that fine?
Yeah, absolutely. We're good.
Yeah, we may leave it open while we're talking to.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. I just
Getting stuff.
Yeah, we're just shooting the shit.
I think you and Elizabeth did it one time where Elizabeth taught and you walked around and did the adjustments. Yeah.
Yeah, she DJ'd a couple times too.
Yeah,
It's kinda
I
cool.
was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She has, yeah. She's done live DJing in classes. I would teach and she would DJ. She's good. Yeah, she's doing really good. She's taking care of the kids, and her mom was in town. Her mom is actually in town. Her and her mom's husband, they live on the Eastern Shore for 6 months of the year, and then we're right with her for 6 months. So it's kind of nice. Nice place to totally. So she was just hanging out for the last couple of days. Just her mom. Just help dinner, help the kids. That support. So it's pretty cool. Seriously, and then and seeing the kids with her mom, grandma, they just love it. So really cool.
John, did you send me that? No, I don't think so. That's all right. They have their binders they can look at.
Yeah, they're in system binders.
Okay.
Okay. We all back? We're all back.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let's get
I want
going.
to keep the doors open for a bit.
Yeah, we'll keep the doors open. Keep some airflow in here.
Yeah.
Well,
What camp are? What side are you on? This is whether you're going to graduate or not. The last thing is a battle between the two sides.
Anatomy last section or anatomy second last section? Okay, so first page of anatomy section, myofascial lines of the body. Whatever else they may be doing individually, muscles also operate across functionally integrated body-wide continuities within fascial webbing. These sheets and lines follow the warp and weft of the body's connective tissue fabric, forming traceable meridians of myofascia. Thomas Myers. So if you flip the page, so we're going to look at we're going to break down each line, and then we're going to talk about the the postural function, the movement function. Yes, postural function, movement function. So if you look at we'll take functional lines as an example. If you look at the picture to the right is the actual diagram of the functional line. The main type on the left, the copy on the left, is going to be postural function, what it does posturally for us, movement function, how it creates movement, and then underneath that is this kind of where I'm going, is the myofascial tracts. The myofascial tracts are the literal connective tissue that make up the line, right? The actual connective tissue that make up the line, and we'll get into that in more depth later. So, okay, so. Functional lines. You want to take postural function, Chris?
Yeah. So the postural function, these lines are less involved in standing posture than any of the other lines. They involve superficial muscles that are so much in use during day-to-day activities that their opportunity to stiffen or fascially shorten to maintain posture is minimal. These lines do have strong postural stabilizing functions in postures like yoga poses that require stabilizing the upper girdle of the trunk. The movement function, we'll go right through it. These lines enable us to give extra power and precision to the movement of the limbs by lengthening their lever arm through linking them across the body to the opposite limb in the other girdle. We'll show what that means. They are essential in the contralateral counterbalance between shoulder and hip in every walking step and in sports movements like kicking or throwing a ball. Essentially what it's saying there is that the functional lines, once you start waking up and moving your body, they start warming up. By the time, unless you're going to a 6 a.m. class, potentially, if you go to any later class, just the natural movements of your day, when you wake up and you go about your business, those lines are warming. That's the point he's making, is that it's very difficult for those lines to stiffen. And because what we're saying is weakness precedes tightness. And so it's hard for those lines to become weak because they're so involved in every single movement. All that to say, when you start really working with people and you start seeing their bodies and limitations, most likely it's not going to be the functional line, but it is a line. There was a period of time where we actually didn't even cover this in the teacher training because we're like, listen, there's a functional line. There's not really a chance for it to stiffen or tighten. We're not really addressing it in the sequence. We can just hold off and talk about the sleeve of the body, the spiral line, the deep front line. We started including it because we're like, we just need to give people the full story about what the 7 myofascial lines really are. So that's the kind of the story behind it is you'll see nowhere except in step 1, and we just add it in there because any movement's going to touch on the functional lines, but everywhere else you don't see them because they're already warm. What he's talking about, the contralateral movement, is if you just think of what's happening when you walk. It's so funny. When you normally walk, you just walk. And now when I'm trying to demonstrate walking, I'm like, no, but you walk and it's left arm, right leg, right arm, left leg, right? Those are contralateral movements that's part of the functional line. When you throw a ball, the left leg lifts, the right arm. So this is where you get power from it. It's like, this is what's happening in the functional line. This is part of their movement function, is to create these types of movements. So we don't do baseball, but you guys get my point, right? Any questions? Functional lines, we kind of breeze through them because they're not really going to shorten. They're part of the body, but they're already warm. And they're happening all the time just in our basic walking. Cool? Yeah. Yeah.
So the glute is part of this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, aspects of the glute,
So-
gluteus maximus.
So just because I got something going on with my hamstring and on my glute, I can't quite figure out what's happening.
Is it high up in the hamstring, like lower portion of the glute?
Yeah, but it's kind of all over. I mean, I've actually had it needled and like done some stuff. And so it gets better and then it comes back. And sometimes if I run, it gets better, believe it or not. And then, but like to me, I think it's connected to my hamstring. I think my glute, which I think it is, right? My glute.
Well, the hamstring's attached to the ischium,
Okay.
the bone that's
Right.
called, the other kind of
Okay,
lay term is a sitting bone.
Right. Okay.
So not like in a way that like there's a tendon or a ligament connecting or tendon connecting.
But like all of that that's going on there is like tweaking my low back and my hip. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, what may be happening is because if there's, and the reason I asked where it was is if there's a slight strain or tear
Yeah.
in the attachment of the hamstring.
No, it's further up. It's more
It's-
like
Gotcha.
but
Yeah,
it's
then
still-
it may
it's
be.
down. I mean, I'm still getting pain down here occasionally.
Is it shooting?
Pain up here. No, it's not like shooting pain. It's like tension. To me, I feel like it's like tension. You know, like I can feel like, did I overstretch it or am I not stretching enough kind of concept?
Yeah.
But but I feel like it's also, doing stuff up here.
It's murder mystery next door, by the way, guys. So they're gonna have a.
God, I'm like, is this gonna happen really? I'm like, so
The reason I brought it up is because of the fact that this line has the glute in it. And I guess I feel like that's a major muscle or major, no? It's not like-
It is a major. It's a major muscle, but if it wouldn't necessarily be related to the hamstring.
Right.
So it'd be. I'd have to dive a little deeper with you, Beth, to see exactly what you're feeling, where you're feeling it, and where kind of and specifics with it. But if you, what can happen is you can have specific tension or a problem in one part of the line of the myofascial line, and you can feel it in another part of the line.
Okay, so like you mentioned something about a weakness in one place, like so the opposite of your hamstring is your quad,
Mhm.
right? So like a lot of times in postures you say, tighten your, quad
Engage
so
your
that it opens up your hamstring.
supports the opening of the
Supports
supports the opening of the hamstring.
So what is there an opposite to glute?
Not really. I mean, you can.
Core? Is it core related maybe?
It depends. It really depends on like what again, I'd have to dive deeper into exactly what you're experiencing, but it could be a tightness in the iliacus or the psoas, the hip flexor muscles. A lot of times that can create a tilt in the pelvic bowl, which the pelvis itself, which can put strain on the hamstring group, or can do stuff to the glute itself. But it could be as simple as, like Chris said, you have a specific strain or a slight tear somewhere. And so where he was prodding his hamstring injuries, you almost always depends, but a lot of times in yoga, where people will experience it is in the ischium, is in the sitting bone, and they'll feel that the attachment of the hamstring, and it'll last for months. And there's a couple of things you can do to kind of support it and continue to practice if it's not really bad. But that's where kind of he was going with it. But it doesn't sound like. Sounds like there's more stuff happening higher up into the hip. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then sometimes where we're feeling the pain isn't necessarily where we need to stretch. A lot of times it's not what we need to actually stretch. Sometimes it's the opposite. So like if I'm sitting at a desk all day like this, I feel tension in my shoulders and upper back. And so we think, well, I need to stretch my shoulders and upper back. And the reality is I need to stretch my front. I need to stretch the pec majors and the muscles in the front of the chest, right? In order to, so I get that to open, it's going to balance out what's happening in the back. And what's happening in the back is there's a constant lengthening and pulling, which can start to create pain in the attachments. We start to feel that as pain, but we think, oh, I just need to stretch that out. So we do all of that stuff. And the reality is I need to stretch this in order to find that balance. So a lot of times where we're feeling pain isn't what we need to stretch. It's a lot of times the opposite. Anyway, so, but we can talk offline a little. It's okay. We can talk offline and get into a little more detail with it. All right, let's flip the page. Let's take a look at arm lines. So when we get into, the myofascial tracts, just hold on that for a moment, and we'll dive deeper into that in just a little bit. All right, so arm lines, postural function. Since the arms hang from the upper skeleton in our upright posture, they are not part of the structural column as such. Given their weight, however, and their multiple links to our daily activities, the arm lines do have a postural function. Strain from the elbow affects the mid-back, and shoulder malposition can create significant drag on the ribs, neck, breathing functions, and beyond. All right, so although they're not part of the actual postural structural column, they can affect it. That's basically where he's going with that. Movement function in myriad daily manual activities of examining, manipulating, responding to, and moving through the environment, our arms and hands perform these tensile continuities. The arm lines act across the 10 or so levers of joints in the arm to bring things toward us, push them away, pull, push, or stabilize our own body. A simple hold, or simply hold part of the world still for our perusal or modification. So those are arm lines. And again, we'll cover the myofascial tracts later.
What does shoulder malposition mean?
Like think of strong person, right? Or turtle.
How I'm sitting right
Shoulder malposition is going. So this doesn't have anything to do with posture, but malposition of this can affect posture, right? So mountain pose, to reposition it, external rotation, snug the head of the shoulder blade, head of the shoulder blade on the back. Any malposition of that, meaning back from that, further external rotation to lift the chest, right, affects posture. Basically, extreme retraction, extreme protraction. So they affect posture, but they're not actually involved with posture. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's flip and make it through this, and then the exercise will be fun. All right, superficial back line, the postural function, the overall posture function. The overall postural function of the superficial back line is to support the body in full extension to prevent the tendency to curl over into flexion. Movement function, with the exception of the flexion at the knees. Don't we stand up for a second? with the exception of the flexion at the knees, right, when he's bending, boom, just like that, and the plantar flexion of the ankle, that where he's like pointing. The overall movement function of the superficial back line is to create extension, right? So if he's in a fold, extension means to come upright, or hyperextension, which is essentially just an anatomical term for a back bend. Because we are born in a flexed position, think fetal pose, fetal position, with our focus very much inward, the development of strength, competence, and balance in the superficial back line is associated with a slow wave of maturity, moving from this primary flexion into a full and easily maintained extension. The first line that starts getting cultivated in children is a superficial back line. Think about babies that can't hold their head up, right? And they all, like, if you just let them be, they go forward. So my oldest, I think it's like a dad thing where you try to like push them to do things that before they're ready to do it, you know? And so we had this little swing that attaches to the door frame, and she was like, I don't know, 2 months old, maybe, probably less. And I was like, oh, she's gonna get strong, because it's one of those things where it just like bounces. And she sat in that thing and went, and she wasn't gonna fall out, so I let her hang there. But she was literally just sitting there, and like she was just swinging. She had no superficial backline. I should have known that, because she wasn't able.
Dude, you teach this stuff.
I teach this shit. I didn't catch it in my own baby. Oh my God. But so if you think about it, if you look at kids, when they're finally able to go upright, what they've developed is the superficial back line of the body. What it's designed to do is to keep us upright in extension, which is just upright. Or think about it. If this is the superficial back line of the body, when it engages, when it shortens, when it contracts, it brings us into this position. We're born in this position, and that's what is so beautiful about what he's saying. The slow wave of maturity brings us up to be able to be in a fully upright position. And then from that point, further contraction or shortening of it is what creates hyperextension or your back.
Or flexion of the knee, right?
Engaging.
Just think of this, the back line shortening, or plantar flexion of the foot.
Engaging.
This back line engaging, right?
Engaging. Think of a shortening or a contraction of the back line to bring you into the position. That's the movement function of it.
So mountain pose, is that straight, superficial back line?
Yeah, and so what's cool is now we're gonna talk about the superficial front line, and the two together balance each other out.
And the lateral lines and the spiral lines, so mountain pose has a uniqueness that there's activation of almost all the lines.
But in relationship to that, kind of more pinpoint to your question, is what happens here, what we're going to talk about is activation of the superficial front line. But if you look at children and how we develop this, that's kind of it's not necessarily activated, but that's their primal position. So it's engaging this first, and then this balances out so that we're not walking around. So we have to engage the front, and the back, and they balance each other out to be in a full upright position. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Superficial back line, that was that.
All right, superficial front line, postural function. The overall postural function, we're going to compete, guys. We're competitive here. The overall postural function of the SFL is to balance the superficial back lines, what Chris just described, and to provide tensile support from the top to lift those parts of the skeleton which extend forward of the gravity line, the pubis, the rib cage, and face. The movement function, the overall movement function superficial, the SFL, and superficial front line, is to create flexion of the trunk and hips, extension at the knee, and dorsiflexion of the foot. So Chris will show that real fast. And so it's flexion of the trunk. Flexion of the trunk can be two things. It could be obviously that, or he could just hinge forward, that, right? So that's flexion of the trunk. Also flexion of the trunk, or flexion of the hips actually. Hip flexion could be this, right? That's hip flexion, or it could be this. That's hip flexion, right? Flexion of the trunk was what Chris did with the rounding of the trunk. It's flexion of the trunk, okay? It could be, let me find it, make sure, extension of the knee. Imagine, so the superficial front, you've got to imagine this contracting, right? Extension of the knee, that muscle contracts, knee extends. And dorsiflexion of the foot, meaning the foot goes this way. Imagine that contracting, that pulling together. It pulls the foot up. You guys see that? So flexion of the trunk, flexion of the hips, either that way or that way. Extension of the knee extending forward, and then dorsiflexion of the ankle, meaning that it goes that way. You guys see that? So that's superficial back line.
This and this counterbalancing each other to maintain an upright position.
So slight engagement of both the superficial lines. Cool.
All right, let's flip page. Talk about the lateral lines. So the postural function of the lateral lines. The lateral line functions posturally to balance front and back, and bilaterally to balance left and right. The movement function, the lateral line participates in creating a lateral bend in the body, lateral flexion of the trunk. Allison, that's why I need glasses. Lateral flexion of the trunk, abduction at the hip, and eversion at the foot. We'll show you all this in a second. But also functions as an adjustable brake for lateral and rotational movements of the trunk. So check this out.
So think stability half moon, right?
Yeah. So it participates in creating a lateral bend in the body. Think of half moon right, half moon left, lateral flexion of the trunk. So that ends up being more, not just, is that right? Lateral bend in the body. Yeah, that's basically the same thing.
Lateral bend.
Abduction at the hip, abduction to abduct, to take away, right? So the leg separates away from the other leg. Abduction at the hip, and eversion at the foot. That's when the foot turns in that way. But also functions as an adjustable brake for lateral and rotational movements of the trunk. So if he does half moon, and you feel it, right? You're stretching the lateral line on this side, but you're also using the lateral lines to stabilize and position yourself so that you don't collapse over. That's why we say it's not a collapsing into the right side. You want to lengthen up and over. The way you do that is because it's using the lateral lines as the brake to keep you from just collapsing. Does that make sense? Not just lateral movements, but the lateral lines also help moderate rotational movements. When we say lengthen the sides of the body, right, and then work the rotation, the lateral lines are what's activating to help moderate that rotation right and left. Does that make sense? Cool. The body's genius when you start looking at it myofascially. I mean, you're like, wait, you have a line of connective tissue that's on the back line, a line of connective tissue that's on the front line, and these lateral lines that help moderate the forward and the back movements. Oh, by the way, the forward and the back movements complement each other so that you stand upright. And now we're going to start talking about rotational movements.
So we flip it. So look at spiral lines. Postural function. The spiral line functions posturally to wrap the body in a double spiral that helps to maintain balance across all planes. The spiral line connects the foot arches with the pelvic angle and helps to determine knee tracking in walking. It's like if you look at, it's a good picture of it. If you look at the big picture, the big diagram, you go all the way down, look at the foot. The spiral line wraps the bottom of the foot like a stirrup, right? And so you can see, if you look at that, you can see how it will track the foot up to the knee, up to the hip. You guys see that? And it's basically a wrap, right? So that line goes all the way down and then wraps around and comes all the way back up. The movement function, the overall movement function of this spiral line is to create and mediate spirals and rotations in the body. Pretty straightforward, right? And so that's our twisting to create and mediate the spirals. Cool? Right, so next one is a biggie. This is the the major lines. If you flip once, actually flip twice, and you'll see the diagram. And what I want you to just pay attention to for a moment in the diagram, Thomas Myers talks about this in the previous pages, is how volumetric it is. Like, so the other lines have volume, but they're really thin compared to the deep front line. The deep front line actually has volume to it. It's a thicker mass of muscular line.
Cool. So let's talk about it just for a minute. The postural function, the deep front line plays a major role in the body support, lifting the inner arch, stabilizing each segment of the legs, supporting the lumbar spine from the front, stabilizing the chest while allowing the expansion and relaxation of breathing, balancing the fragile neck and heavy head atop it all. Lack of support, balance, and proper tonus in the deep front line will produce overall shortening in the body, encourage collapse in the pelvic and spinal core, and lay the groundwork for negative compensatory adjustments in all other lines. I'll break that down in just a second. The movement function. There is no movement that is strictly the province of the deep front line, aside from hip adduction. So you know when John took the leg out to the side, the deep front line, bringing it back together and pulling the leg in, that's what it does. So other than that, yet neither is any movement outside its influence. You lift an arm, the deep front line is involved. You look left, you look right, the deep front line is involved. Compared to our other lines, this is what John was just saying, this line commands definition as a three-dimensional space rather than a line. Of course, all the other lines are volumetric as well, but are more easily seen as lines of pull. The deep front line very clearly occupies space. Probably the most important sentence in this segment is lack of support, balance, and proper tonus of the deep front line will produce overall shortening in the body, encourage collapse in the pelvic floor and pelvic and spinal core, and lay the groundwork for negative compensatory adjustments in all other lines. This, when we say weakness precedes tightness, we are talking very specifically, for the most part, about the deep front line because of its postural function. It literally is supporting the entire spinal column, and the core of our core it's designed to keep us upright. If we don't have proper tonus, and again, this isn't like six-pack abs. Look at the picture. Notice the deep front line and where it is. Your rectus abdominis, what looks like your core, that most people think, I want to develop a six-pack of abs so I look good. They can have that and have a weak, deep front line. And that weakness, this is when he talks about negative compensatory adjustments in all other lines, this is the weakness precedes tightness. Weakness in the deep front line requires the other more superficial lines to tighten to support the body's spinal column and core. And so, like John said, I feel tension here. I feel like I need to stretch this out. That may not do anything for you because what may be the trigger of that, or like the cause of it, the trigger of the impetus of it is a weakness in the deep front line. So strengthening the deep front line first may solve the issue of the tightness that you experienced in other lines, potentially. It's just super important. That's why if you look at our sequencing now, and step one, we work on the sleeve of the body. We have the functional lines, we have the arm lines. The sleeve is then superficial front, superficial back, and lateral lines. That's the idea. Not just stretching, but strengthening and stretching, right? To get them to be able to do their postural and movement function. Then we go into the spiral line. We're still working up dogs and down dogs. We're still doing the stuff of the superficial sleeve of the body, right? The moment you hit step 3, basically the rest of the sequence is devoted to the deep front line. You first touch on it in step 3. Step 4, as far as the vinyasa is concerned, you do your inversions. Obviously, it needs to be strong enough to be able to go upside down. But once you get step 5, now it's recruiting the deep front line, like infusing it with blood and oxygen so that in step 6, you can open it and create these deep back bends. Right? And then step 7 is now reversing what we've just done in the deep back bend so you can feel good in Shavasana. My point is 3, 4-ish, 5, 6, all devoted to the deep front line. Why? Because of how important it is to have strength, tonus, and flexibility. Why? Because we want to be healthy at 100. I want to be able to and not be where my grandmother was at 80. This is not like, she couldn't live her life in the way that she had once lived it. That's what we're working. I want to continue to live my life in the way I'm living it now. Of course, with little adjustments to the age gracefully, whatever that means. But this is what we're combating with the asana practice. This is why what we do on our mats is so freaking valuable, because it is the design of this to keep us here and to keep us doing what we love in life, whatever that is. That's why.
Because the two major things that go when we get older, mobility, core strength. Mobility and core strength. If you see your parents or grandparents, mobility and core strength is almost always what they're lacking. Right? We saw it in our grandmother. We're starting to see it in our mom, right? Mobility and core strength. And the body, if without mobility and without core strength, the body starts to become a victim of gravity and starts to get pulled down, and pulled down until the body feels more comfortable, right? Like this than it does actually standing upright.
And it's easier to deal with it when it's an acorn and not an oak tree. My mom trying to reverse all the things that have happened at this point, she's fighting an oak tree. Us at this point, already having done the work and continue to do the work, we're dealing with it's an acorn. It's easier, way easier to hold an acorn in your hand than to try to cut down an oak tree. Meaning her patterns are so hardwired. We talked about myelin in relationship to learning new skills, right? When you're younger, you just produce more naturally. It doesn't mean that you can't when you're older. It's just harder. It requires more time and energy and effort to get the same amount of myelin wrapped than it does when you're younger. All to say, if we start the practices now and stay consistent with the practices now, you're going to have it pre-framed, it wired in, so that this is just how life is. I don't even remember. Like, I've asked him for years. I was like, I don't remember what I was like prior to meditating. I don't remember how anxious I was, how impatient I was, how slightly frustrated I was most of the time for no reason at all. That's the point. Once you get to you just do the practice, just sit on your meditation cushion, just get on your mat and just do whatever movement you can, sit for as long as you can. Why? Because we then get to deal with life's things as acorns, not as oak trees. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, so now with this,
so flip back to the very first page or second page where it says functional lines. Actually, you know what? Do this instead. Sorry, guys. There's a better page. Go to, turn to page 17 if you would, please. So with page 17, you can actually pull it out of your binder, and then, no, we'll do that actually. You can pull these last couple pages out of your binder, close your binder back up, and then flip back to page 2, functional lines. You'll notice on page 17 that you pulled out of your binder where it says functional lines, you'll notice that the functional lines on page 17 exactly match the myofascial tracts on page 2. Do you guys see that? Everyone with me? I'll make sure you guys are with me because it's important. So the functional lines on page 17 exactly match the myofascial tracts on page 2, except for on page 17, you have page numbers next to that. Okay? Those page numbers are going to match your anatomy book. Okay? They're going to match your anatomy book. If there isn't a page number next to that muscle or next to that part, then I want you to use your outboard brain, aka your phone, and just type it in and figure out where it is. Basically what we're going to do is we're just going to take the page 17 and your diagram and put a little arrow to where it is on the diagram. So basically, I just want you to identify latissimus dorsi. Right? If you know where it is, some of you have some anatomy background, you can just go and put it on there. If you don't know where it is, open up to page 135 and you'll see exactly what latissimus dorsi looks like. And then you can match it on your diagram. Does that make sense? Let's partner up and do this with a team member. It can be groups of 2, 3, 4 if you want to, doesn't matter.
Zoom people, I'm going to set you up in groups. We'll do breakout rooms. It won't be just one, and it won't be just 2 people. I'll set you up with more.
And if, so if you're in your group, you can say, okay, this person, you take the first 2, I'll take the next 2, and you can kind of move through it faster if you want to, or however you want to do it. You let you guys figure that piece out. But we're going to move through functional lines, arm lines. Just move through as much as you can. We'll give you time. Yeah, totally. You're welcome. We'll give you a period of time to do this, but your job is to identify it, understand what those major muscles are, those major the major soft tissue of the line is, and then just identify it on the diagram so you get familiar with it.
All right, I just opened all the rooms for you all.
Right? So that you could take a class from someone else, somewhere else, from a different style, and say, "Whoa, I like that pose. Where would I put it in my class?" Right? Where would I put it in my class? Or if eventually you're going to be resequencing, you're going to want to sequence a class, and understanding how to sequence a class, meaning build the class from simple to complex, using your pinnacle and blah blah blah, the build up to it. You'll understand where that pose can fit. That's kind of the bigger picture. And so understanding what the myofascial lines are, the major muscles of those lines, helps us do that. Like I can literally look at a pose and say, oh, that's a pose for this step. That's a pose for this step. That pose could go this step or this step because of what it's doing. Does that make sense? All right, so now we are going to segue into the Niyata class, the stability class. We're going to take look at a couple slides here. Make sure I'm on point with what I'm doing. Yes. All right, Chris, you got them on that side.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
everyone in Zoom, can you see my screen? Yeah, it says the Axillary Concepts, Teacher Training 200 hour. Everyone's good?
Chris, before you get to that, pull up this one. It's going to be under Science of Sequencing.
I don't think you sent it to me.
Page, I think it's slide 3, Science of Sequencing.
You didn't send that one to me. Hang tight, everybody.
Yeah, I definitely did.
Pretty sure you didn't.
Definitely did. Just a moment of truth. We're about to find out.
If I can find it.
Email from me 2 days ago.
John, yeah. Syllabus. I got Keynote, I got YTT, Niyata, Stability. Keynote's Manifestation. YTT, Niyata.
Ooh, what's that?
That's the one, I think. There we go.
I'll pop up in a minute for everybody that's on Zoom. Just get that straight. So basically what they're going to look at is what it does looking at up here. This is basically the basic framework for Niyata class, stability class. So you'll notice one of the things you want to
Everyone see that?
In the stability class.
Oops. Yeah,
One
hold
of the things
on.
I want you to notice is that
There we go.
it has 6 steps instead of 7. The only difference is that we're not doing versions in this. more beginner friendly. It's easier for people to access. It's easier for beginners to access. If you decide to leave here and eventually open up a studio, I highly recommend having something like this to help your beginners to come in and be able to get into a practice. It makes a huge difference. And then having something that people can graduate to, like a flow class or something if they choose to, is helpful also. So really the major difference is there are no inversions, but everything else is the same. So if you were to just pull out step 4 of your flow class, which is inversions, and just leave everything else as these 6 steps, this is what it looks like. Step 1, centering and warm up. Step 2, spinning and twisting. Step 3, balance and back bends. Step 4, core strengthening. Step 5, deep back bends. And step 6, finishing and closing. Cool.
But don't think of it like, because a lot of people get caught up, you know, they're like, man, Chris, I saw you in a stability class. Like, haven't you been doing it long enough to like be done with the beginner class? Like, no. Like, this class is designed not like by nature of the movements and the transitions, it lends itself to being a more accessible to beginners. So we call it beginner friendly because they want to know where to go. But you all know that class like is enough.
That's my favorite class.
I mean, it's just so, yeah, there's just like, that does so much. And there's something that's so, because the sequence doesn't change, but little bit here and there, it creates this framework that you get to see what you're bringing to it. Because you can't blame it on the postures, right? You can't blame it on like, oh, I didn't know that one, or I knew this one, or that. Like, it's like you get this, this ability to be self-reflective inside of it more so than a flow class, because there's more variables of changing that, you know, like it's the sequence is different. Basically it's the sequence or the music or whatever it is. Like, this is such a beautiful class. So please, like, your students, if you go out and you teach both, are going to be like, oh, that's a beginner, so I graduate, and then once I'm in flow class, I never have to do a stability class. No. The reason we have both of them is that the two put together and practice, like, together each week is what for us has created the most sustainable experience of yoga that we've ever done. So I just want to be real clear. Yes, this is beginner friendly, but it isn't like a graduation from stability into vinyasa or niyata, and then now I never take a stability class again. At least not in the way we approach it. Some people will lend themselves like, I just love flow. That's all I love to do. It's totally, and like, there's no judgment. It's all good. Some people just love stability, and that's cool too. But for us, why we have both of them is they're designed to be practiced together. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, that's one of the things about what I mentioned about my friend, who's like, don't you get bored with stability? And my response is no, because I feel like I get to, what you just said, that when I'm in the class, I get to decide, is it more muscular, is it more organic, what am I doing? And not only that, but then there are times that you notice, and like balancing staff, you know, your back leg is supposed to be strong and straight. Well, there, are people doing this, so,
Yeah.
and I don't think they're really getting the benefit of that posture when they're trying to bend more, trying to move, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, the cue is, I think, when you step forward, okay, you're in the posture, right here.
Yeah.
With your back leg straight and strong, right? And your arms are up, and you're supposed to keep your triceps next to your ears.
Right.
And then you decide.
Take it from that point,
then
right?
you decide where you're gonna go.
Right.
But if somebody is here, like with the wobbly, so it's interesting. But I think that's the beauty of what you said. There's a balance between stability and flow, and deciding what you're doing.
Yeah, and even in the stability class itself, so for Zumbi, she was as Beth was just describing the nature of the stability class and what makes it what it is. But even each pose has this progression that can literally last like lifetimes. Like, how was your standing bow? How was it when you started? Do you feel like you're done with it? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So there's but that ability to like that ability to understand and notice the subtleties of progression, it takes a long time for students to get to. We move from gross to subtle is the idea. Where do I put my arms? Where do I put my legs? all right, now what I'm supposed to be breathing too? No, it's not going to work. Like, and then to then, right? I'll breathe and then I'll move, or I'll move and then I'll breathe. To then, like, oh, ground the big toe ball mound of the right foot down and feel how that lifts the inner arch of the foot. What? You ask a new person to feel that initially, they're going to be like, I have no idea what you're just talking about. Did you say my foot? My foot does that? My dad asked me one time, he was like, all the things you say in class, can you really like feel that? I'm like, and my response was, hey dad, when you're in meditation, can you really quiet your mind? He was like, of course. I was like, same thing. I've just trained that as much as you've trained that. This is years and years ago. But that's the point. It takes time. You work from gross to subtle. Yeah. Cool. Everyone.
Quick question. I guess it's maybe a business question, but you offer more flow classes than you do stability. Is that because of people coming into the studio at this point? Or like your live stream is mainly flow versus stability?
Yeah, it was, if you look at, like, kind of
Where am I? Sorry.
got thrown out the window post-COVID, like, because it was a shit show. But before that, we had more even throughout the schedule of stability and flow. What it's been, Susan, is just a testing things for 15 years and seeing, okay, is this going to work at this time, and is this going to work at this time? Let's change this class and see if it works. It's this, and so it's been a constant shuffling over that time period to figure out what class works best at what time, and that's kind of how it landed. And now we're just like catch up, trying to shift things, move things around.
To be real honest, at this point, the schedule is like, hey, you can teach at that time, and you teach flow, you're teaching that time at that. Like, it was like, we just need as many classes at this point as possible. And that means whatever you can teach at this time, we're going to teach that class.
And then the live stream, we were like, all right, we're doing a flow and stability every single day. And then the weekends, we were like, okay, what was it originally at those time slots on the weekends? And like 10 o'clock was flows. We'll just do flows at that time. So.
I thought it was a little complicated.
It is, like, our regular schedule, like prior to COVID, it was way complicated. And it's this crazy algorithm that we don't have, or we're just doing it like, okay, there's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but then Tuesday, Thursday, but look at the day itself over a week. And then let's look at the times, and then the teachers, and then the class. Like, there's so many variables. Is it stability or flow? Is it 4 or 4:30? And then is it 60, 75, or 90? And then Norfolk or VB, because they're different worlds or different places that people react differently. So prior to that, it is, and it will get back to that. But right now, the current reality is like, get them in. Let's get the classes taught. Let's do this. It's been a little crazy. Yeah. Okay.
So let's look at Niyata class breakdown. Let's break this class down a little more detail for you guys. So if we look at step 1, we are looking at centering warm-ups. The pinnacle for Niyata class, pinnacle is second cobra and then hands to feet. Second cobra and hands to feet with superficial back line, superficial front line. That's the line. Those are the deepest expressions of superficial back line, superficial front line in that set. So second cobra and hands to feet. The lines that we're accessing, superficial front line, obviously superficial front line, superficial back line, and then the lateral lines. You see that in the half moon, that's standing half moon. Right? Lateral lines, and then it's all superficial front and superficial back, and we're doing our step backs. Special considerations: vertical stabilization, and then intention setting. Special consideration for that vertical stabilization, because vertical stabilization we teach in the very beginning of the class. And we want to do this, guys, we want to do this in a way that helps students understand that vertical stabilization is a blueprint for all the poses that we do. Right? To help them understand that, because if people continually, people that continually practice in the stability class, they can get to the very beginning mountain pose, and in their minds are like, come on, get us through this. It's time to practice. Come on, this is not part of the practice. You guys we're just standing here. But the reality is we're doing two things. We're We are first, and I think most foremost, getting people out of the busyness of their mind and immediately into their body. So immediately you're saying, okay, to do this with your feet, do this with your legs, do this with your pelvis, do this with your core, your side bodies, your shoulders, and then your head, right? So obviously slower, but you're immediately pulling them out of the task-oriented mindset and into their bodies. Feel your feet, feel your legs, feel this, stand on purpose, and your hands to heart center. So it immediately shifts them into presence, and probably just as important, if we teach it in a way and at least make a statement that these alignment principles that we find in mountain pose and vertical stabilization are the same principles that we want to use in every pose that we do, right? We let them understand, help them understand that this is a blueprint, that what I'm doing with my feet is the same thing I'm doing when I'm in plank. Right? It's the same thing I'm doing when I'm in standing bow or whatever pose, right? Same thing with my legs. Same thing I'm doing with my legs in mountain pose. The same thing I want to do with my legs when I'm in standing bow, when I'm in balancing staff, right? That these principles apply to all the poses. Maybe not all of them, depending on the pose, but the majority of them. Yeah, hands to feet pose. So you're here. And we'll break down all the poses.
And Zoomers, real quick, if you have a question, unmute yourself and say it, because I can't see the chat when I'm sharing the screen, okay? Cool.
Why is it that when we're in stability that we don't know? Is it because it's a beginner class, or thought of as a entry level, and you don't want to freak people out?
Yeah, that's kind of where we are now with it.
Oh, there
But, originally, it just wasn't there. We didn't own at all.
Sorry, I'll try to do it.
When we originally studied the roots of the style.
Right.
And Bishan Ghosh and Bikram Chowdhury and Jimmy Barkin, they never owned. It was very body focused. Yeah. And so now it's easier for a beginner to enter in and not get esoteric and homing on.
Get in their heads about homing.
Like, oh, I'm chanting
How
for
did I
the
sound?
meaning. I'm worshiping it. And then intention
Hey, Chris.
letting them set an intention, right? Giving time for them to set intention. What always happens for a newer teacher is they will tell the class, okay, now either set your intention of dedicating your class to someone in your life, and about a second, maybe 2 seconds, they'll start talking, right? They'll go right into, here's my theme, they'll start saying something. So really, the main thing as teachers to understand with intention setting is simple, just give them time. So when you tell them, now set your intention for, pause for a second.
Yeah, hang tight.
Is that your mic?
Yours.
Second, guys, we're gonna.
Let me just double check your thing real quick.
It's on. So I got 2 bars.
You're good. Yes.
All right, I think we're live again.
Yeah, we're good.
So the main thing with intention setting, what I was going to say is really just give them time. When you tell them to set their intention, count to yourself to about 8 or 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Or here, what I always do is when I tell them to set an intention, I set an intention. Right? I'll say thank you for allowing me to be a clear and present instrument for your healing power to come through. Blah 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 blah. And then I'll interrupt them by, okay, and then this is what this means, and then set a theme. Guys, good with that? Questions? Zoom people, questions?
Any
Everyone good?
questions? Feel free to unmute yourself now that you can do that.
And you can see the chat now, right, Chris?
Yeah, I got
Pull the
it.
chat up. Okay, so let's. So step 2, standing and twisting poses. The pinnacle is revolving triangle. The line is the line is spiral line. Special considerations is the degree of twist and torque, crossover versus not. Degree of twist and torque. And so basically what this is, and in the Niyata class, the stability class, this special consideration is a little bit more for your understanding when you're sequencing a flow class. It's really more for that, but it's good to understand it here in that when you're sequencing simple to complex, your twists need to be less torque to more torque. So if I have Chris go from like a knee down twist, upright with the body, Chris.
What's that?
Upright with the body, and just arm, right arm back, left arm
Oh,
forward.
gotcha.
Yeah. So if I have him do this, this is less torque, right? This is probably one of the more simple twists. Meaning he's just using his core strength to work the twist, right? And then the next level would be one hand down, back toes tuck under, straighten the back leg, and then twist from here, right? Now he has leverage off his grounded hand to close kinetic chain. He can use the floor to help him create torque, right? But he hasn't crossed over his center line, right? The next depth,
You guys see this center line, this being center line, right?
right? So he hasn't crossed over his center line. So that's his center line, right? The next and the deepest would be crossing over center line. I'm using these as examples, but obviously it could be any pose, right? Chair twist, crossing center line, deeper twist, then it would be standing twist. And I'll talk about that when we sequence the class. I'll talk about why we plug in a standing twist when we do, even though it's a simpler twist, right? There's a reason for it. All right, so do you guys see that? Make sense? So the easiest twist would be an open twist without grounding at all. More depth would be one hand to the floor, using the floor as leverage. The next depth would be crossing over center line, something like that. Or if you extended the arms, you guys see that too. Cool? So that's the degrees of torque in your twist. And that's crossing over center line versus not. Guys good with this? Cool. All right, so take a look at step 3. Step 3, balancing and backbending poses. The pinnacle is standing bow. Line is the deep front line. Special considerations, simple to complex to the pinnacle. And really that goes for everything, but it's just understanding exactly what we're doing as we break down the pinnacle. And so, yeah, and so it's working standing, working hamstring opening, working hip flexor opening, the spine extension, hip flexor open would be hip extension, but working those elements to not only access the DFL, not only access the deep front line, but to break down the components of standing bow, which is already built in. Is your pinnacles are that, right? The steps of a class are the breakdown, simple to complex to the pinnacle. Cool? Good? Yeah. You guys good if I go next one? Everyone got this one? Okay. And I can send this to you if you guys want me to. I'll send you a PDF copy of this. All right, step 4, core and spine strengthening. The pinnacle is peak core experience, right? And full locus. Peak core experience for the front of the body, full locus for the back of the body. Because as you see, we isolate. The difference, guys, in Niyata, the difference in stability class versus vinyasa class is it's the Niyata class or stability class is stationary. Right, so you're not getting a lot of the development of the superficial back line like you do in a flow class because of the nature of the flow class. You're on your hands a lot, right? You're in down dog a lot. There's a lot of engagement of the superficial back line of the posterior chain of the body. And so we make a point. You see it in the flow class when we still do like we do these poses, full locus, locus and full locus, but there's special attention in the Niyata class for that reason, because it is stationary. And so we isolate the strengthening of those muscles, the back line. All right, so the lines, the DFL, deep front line, and there's superficial back line work going on too. Special considerations, what is the core? Why is it important to strengthen all areas? I think we talked about that before. You guys get that the core is this whole area. It's kind of the whole trunk of the body. And that we like it's vital to make sure this is strong. It's also vital to make sure the deep front line, the superficial back line is strong, right? Because it holds us upright. Cool. So that's step 4. You guys ready to jump? All right. Step 5, deep back bends. Our pinnacle is camel. Line is just the same thing, deep front line. And then special consideration is a progressive build of chest and upper belly for Sphinx. So this is kind of simple to complex. We kind of broke it down for you guys. You have a better understanding. So progressive build of chest and upper belly, meaning extension of the trunk, extension of the upper body, extension of the spine. So Sphinx to front of thighs hero, which we actually have changed to cowboy, cowgirl, which is hip extension. So think about it this way: spine extension, hip extension. Then to shoulders, chest, belly, hips, thighs for bow, right? So you start to put it together in bow. So there's an isolation in Sphinx of spine extension, isolation of hip extension in cowboy, cowgirl, and then we start to put it together in bow. You put it together with hip extension and spine extension at the same time. So you're kicking back and kicking up in this bow, right? This is floor bow, kicking back and kicking up. So there's chest, belly, hips, thighs. To deeper expression of the same with the front of the throat in camel, and camel is the pinnacle. Meaning we're also, so in those other poses, we're not necessarily, some people do when they do bow and look up, but we're not accessing the front of the throat necessarily in those other poses, and we do when we hit our pinnacle, when we hit camel. That's the idea. And you know, as you guys know, even with those, when we are doing when we do camel, we're not dumping in the back, but what you'll see a lot of people do is they'll dump into the back of the neck and they'll just drop the head straight back, as opposed to drawing the line of the jaw back, then taking the gaze up, and then drawing the chin back to open up this area without jamming here, maintaining an arch in the back of the neck, just like you would in the low back. So that's the idea, right? To be progressive, systematic with it. Cool? Guys good with that? Right. And then we get to our last step, step 6. Finishing postures and closing, pinnacle of Shavasana, lines, superficial back line, and the relaxation of all the lines. All right, and so superficial back line, we just contracted that posterior chain, the superficial back line of the body in the previous step. And so that's the area we're going to focus on so that we feel good in Shavasana. And obviously the relaxation of all the lines. So special considerations: hips, hamstrings, low back release. That's the SBL release. And then teach Shavasana as a pose, and close with intention. Really, really important. When, as teachers, we get to the very last, I think we talked about this in flow, we get to the last step, and a lot of times we want to drop the mic and run out of the room, high five, right? Without actually teaching Shavasana as a pose, meaning teach what they're doing with the body, and then teach what's happening with the mind. Teach how to relax the body. Bring the heels to the edge of the mat, let the toes fall open, set the arms where it's most comfortable, bring them wide, palms facing up, slide the shoulder blades onto the back, relax, let the tongue fall away from the roof of the mouth, you could say something like that. And you could do a progressive body scan if you want to, and then teach what's going on in the mind, right? What's happening in the mind, blah, 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 where they are, where they need to be, and then close with intention. If closing with intention is pulling your theme back, finishing with a quote, and that's it. And at that point, you can drop the mic and be done. Cool. I think that's it. Check the slides. Yeah, that was it. Cool. Questions on that? Does anyone need to see that last slide again? I kind of jumped too soon. You guys good? I can send you guys that if you need. If you want it. Cool. All right. You guys need to take a little break? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Take a little break. Go out in some air conditioning. Oh, I gotcha. We'll come back together in about 3 minutes.
Arms overhead. The next thing is, he just did it. Go ahead and bring your arms overhead. I need you to listen to what I'm saying.
Sorry.
Then he can bring the feet closer together. And the reason we say that, it's kind of like breaking the mountain pose principle a little bit. It's simply because the lateral movements right and left, if the feet are wider, it may inhibit it a little bit because you have a wider base, meaning that if I'm able to go more that way and my feet aren't as, if they're wider, the knees may need to buckle. You'll see that a lot. People with wider, and they go over, all of a sudden their knees are bending. So if the feet come closer together, it can help activate the inner thighs and give a better base for the lateral movements. Okay, so then that's it. The lateral movements, you go body right. Basic alignment, or let's talk about modification. Modification, you just do less, 1 inch. That's it. 1 inch and hold. A lot of it, like in the Niyata sequence, a lot of the modifications are embedded in the way we say it. Inhale as you exhale, body to the right, hips to the left. Move 1 inch, you're in the pose. So that's how people know, okay, that's what I can do. That's to move deeper, let the body move up and over to the right. Here's the alignment. Shoulders and hips parallel. The best way to describe it is the front of the mat, in case you're not in like mirrors. That it took John and I like a month to figure out when we were live streaming. Like, wait, they're at home. They don't know if there's mirrors or what they're facing, but they're always facing the front of their mat. So shoulders and hips parallel to the front of the mat. There is symmetry between the head and the arms. I'm not sure why, but there's a tendency I see some people, and it's actually more like intermediate advanced people, where they start tilting and looking up to the left. I don't know where that came from or why, but like the idea, it's just a rotation of the neck. I'm not sure why that's involved. Cool. Gaze straight ahead. Yeah. Chin level. Right. So everything's in this nice mountain pose neutral position. And then the body moves to the right. What John just showed you happens when people want to go deeper than their lateral line will allow. So what has to happen is their shoulder will dip forward. Give this view and go to the right. And then fold. And what ends up happening is it takes it out of the lateral line and starts moving it into the superficial back line. So you just come back out of it, come out of it a little bit and hold. Again, the idea is this opening, right? But also remember, it's strengthening as it's opening because it's working as that adjustable break like we talked about. And then how deep you go, it just depends on how you feel. Right? You see people in like the yoga competitions, and it looks like they're literally creasing themselves in half going to the right. They have that capability, great, but it looks like they're dumping and not using enough muscular integration. Yeah, there's yoga competitions out there.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Could you clarify
Physical
that?
competitions. Right?
Yeah.
Competitions.
I'm like, I want to see a meditation competition. That would be cool, right?
Chris
They're
Yaps
at
has
it
been
for
still
8 days.
for 3 days.
I don't think he's coming out.
For 3 days.
Yes.
I just want to ask what you said about the head tilting up and forward. So one of the cues is, kind of like an apple is in chin on your chin level to keep your chin level.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, sometimes there's a cue like to point your fingers to the back.
Yeah.
Corner of the room. So maybe does that?
It wouldn't rotate the head. The reason it's a good cue. So if you've ever, Zoomers, Beth asked, so there's a cue where you'll hear like point the fingers to the back corner of the room. And she was wondering if that is is part of what happens when people are rotating. I don't think it is, but the reason that cue is there is once you start going deeper, it's natural to flex a little bit. And when you get towards your edge, when there's more of a tendency for that to happen because you're reaching that limitation, the cue is then lift and point the fingers to the back corner to keep the flexion happening. A lot of times what ends up happening is cues will happen to get people to not do something, right? Like point the fingers to the back right corner, and then over a long enough period of time with like the telephone game, it's like, oh no, we should be extending spine, like we should be doing a back bend. And the idea is just a little bit of lift to keep from flexing forward. And that's the idea.
So really it comes down to understanding what we're doing in the body. And this is a lateral line opener, right? And if I, like Chris said, if I hit my limit, meaning my tensile limit of opening, and I try to push myself deeper, this ends up happening, right? And if a teacher sees this, and they're like, well, then start to draw your fingers towards the back corner of the room to get them back into alignment. You take it long enough, and all of a sudden, that's people that are in good alignment are now doing this, you know, and that's not what we want. So it's a lateral line opener, and so as teachers, just seeing, okay, what am I trying to do here? What is the ultimate goal? And if you see people that are out of alignment, then cueing specifically in ways that can get there. I was going to say, or hands-on adjustments are really good when that comes back around at some point, hopefully. Yeah. The good old days. Back in the old days, we used to touch each other. What? That's crazy talk. Without a mask? Yeah, there were no masks, no gloves. You just touch each other. No way. That's so fucked up. Did you guys know you could spread disease that way? We didn't care.
Yeah, we did. We knew there was flu and shit. Yeah, when everyone was going crazy.
Oh my God. Okay, we're back.
With the cues? Yeah.
Hey, Chris, the sound's cutting out.
Once you've gotten the basic body position down and you're there and you have them in the pose, then it's really a lot of vertical stabilization. That's it. So when you think about, remember the framework of cueing, right? Teach the basic body position, teach how to modify, teach how to deepen and what the deepest is. You can get through that pretty quickly. And so once you feel like because there's really no like deepest expression. Like at the deepest, your body should be making a right angle. No, like it's just go deeper and then feel it. Once you're there, then it's vertical stabilization. So I'll give you an example of it. So rotate the palms away with an inhale, sweep your arms overhead, interlace the fingers and release the index fingers. And then what I missed was you can move the body a little bit to give kind of like their own multi movements. You know, on flow class, dog, we do that. We do the same thing here for this first time. Starting to get into it. Cool. Come back to neutral.
Chris.
Together. As you ground down, inhale, lengthen up. And as you exhale, and you're in the pose. One, you can hold that and modify. Shoulders and hips parallel to the front of the mat. Symmetry between the head and the arms, assuming they can see themselves. Once I've got them in that, now it's angle the feet from the corners, from the waist down, ground as you lift up and over the right side body. Ribs pull in, low belly pulls in, tailbone lengthens down. I've just sealed their core so they're stabilized. Working
Hey, Chris. Chris.
As you inhale.
Chris, can you hear us?
Basic body position. How do you deep? Oh wait, basic body position. Here's modification. Here's how you deepen. Cool.
Chris.
This side, what will end up happening is you can basically say exactly 20% of the people were listening to you 20% of the time, which is also
Chris, can you hear me?
there is a lot, there's variation, so if you could pull something off like that,
Right.
flip flops would be fine. The culture knows it, right? The culture's. Yeah, it was sexist. Okay, cool.
Cool. All right, we should be back, ready to roll.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And don't forget, if you can't hear us, unmute, because I don't want you to like type and then I'm just going off on a tangent, hopefully relevant to what we're talking about. But you can unmute yourself and then let me know.
Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah, cool, sweet. Okay, so you go right, you go left, right, and then you do a back bend. Once you go into your back bend, no, that's okay. Once you get into your back bend, the feet, we always cue, because if you did say bring the feet together, make sure there's space between the feet for your back bending. Again, it's mountain pose at that point, stacking hips over knees, over ankles. We always initially give right the modification. If you have any shoulder or low back issues, the hands come to the low back, just for more support. Now, some people use that to go deeper because why? Why would you go deeper with the hands to the back versus this? More support, which gives you what type of experience? Organic. Who said organic? Somewhere over there. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. It's more organic versus muscular, right? With the arms overhead, now you got to carry weight. You got to carry gravity. It requires more muscular integration, which will inhibit the depth that happens. Cool. So you cue that up. That's the beginning, and then it's is it turn? Thanks. And then it's as you lift the heart. That's the pose. There's your modification. Again, a lot of it's not like, this is how you modify. It's like, if you lift the heart, that's the pose. You can stay there or start to lift the heart higher and then work back. At this point, I'm very, very specific. Pull the low belly in and lengthen the tailbone down, because I know, and you all know, that when they're doing a spinal extension, the two primary movers of the spine are lumbar and cervical. So I'm very, very clear at saying pull the low belly in, draw the tailbone down to support the lumbar because it's an extension. And pull the jawline back to engage the muscles of the front of the neck because I know the neck is an extension as well. And then it's just a matter of hugging the shoulder blades in, grounding the feet down, whatever comes out vertical stabilization wise. For 3, 2, 1, and release back to center.
He said we keep talking and he's not hearing us.
Can you
That
guys?
is so weird. Hold on.
So when they actually try to talk, it's not coming out. Okay.
It's odd.
Have
Chris, can you hear me?
Will you try again, Kelly? Will you try unmuting yourself again?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello.
No, so weird. Okay, I'll figure it out. That's so odd. Let me do this. Let me try one more thing. Play. No. No, that's odd. Okay, we'll figure it out. I don't know why that is. All right, here we go.
all right. So people in Zoom, if you have a question, do some emojis. Do like 2 or 3 thumbs up in the chat so we can look down and see emojis there, and then we can connect with you. Something like that. I think.
Yeah, like a middle finger. Or
do like 3 or 4 middle fingers.
Something that really catches our attention. Angry face emojis. Okay, so then you go back. Any questions about the back bend? Okay, so this is what's so cool to look at. You've gone right, you've gone left, you've gone back. In the matter of maybe a minute or two, you have worked lateral and superficial front line in a strengthening and opening way. And then immediately what happens, you take a forward fold, and now you're working superficial back line. In minutes, the entire sleeve of the body you've accessed. That's the genius of half moon Vishnu style. Cool? Once you've done that, everyone's good, moving on. I'm just going to take them through the step back salutation so you can see it in the sequence. I'm not going to break it down because we all know step back salutations. Cool? So we'll inhale, arms overhead. Exhale and forward fold. Inhale, long spine. As the exhales, right foot floats back. Careful. On this one, the slight variation is we drop the back knee down, untuck the toes, press the hips forward and down, and give the option to bow the head. This does two things. One, it's a cool experience because he's in a lunge, he's working the part of the superficial front line here. But because the knee down aspect, you can actually deepen the stretch here and get a stretch here through the superficial back line by bowing the head. It's an interesting pose that way. Some people, when you bow the head, you may even feel it all the way up into the hip flexors. But the idea is just to get better quad stretch. The other thing, that's number one. Number two is that it also teaches people in a kind of by example that this is a way you can modify your lunge by dropping the back knee down. Cool? So then he lifts the head, tucks the back toes under, steps back, down dog, watch the computer. With an inhale, he comes forward into plank. You can always give the modification to drop the knees down, and then he lowers all the way down. First pass, first iteration, we do baby cobra. The in-house movements are the exact same as the first two of the flow class. Lowers back down, inhale. As you exhale, press up to the knees, push the hips back to the heels, extended child's pose. Inhale, come forward, tuck the toes, lift the hips, push back. Again, this is another moment where we give them the option to walk it out, first down dog, and you get some nice capability of getting the knees, the hips, the ankles, the side bodies moving. The way I approach teaching alignment here is in this first one, because you only have two, right? You're going to go right foot back, right side, and then left side. So basically two down dogs that you're holding to give alignment. First one on this side, I'll cue from the hands to the core. So they have that alignment. On the other iteration, the next one, I'll go feet to thighs. So at that point, within two, they've gotten the full alignment versus overwhelming them with everything that you could possibly think of to say in mountain pose wise on the right side for this one, and everything you could possibly think of to say in mountain pose for the other side too. Does that make sense? It's giving them enough information at each point so you know they're aligned, and not overwhelming them with a bunch of cues, because they're getting bombarded with information in a class. And if they're new, that's a tough thing to handle.
Okay.
Okay.
So where's and maybe I missed it, sorry. Where's child pose? The first, like the extended, oh, you did it. Okay.
Yeah, it's all right. Right after you press up.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So then he lifts the heels, right leg sweeps high. And this is embedded too. Shift the gaze forward, bring the knee tight to the chest, and step the foot forward. Lift the heels, gaze forward, knee tight to chest are the three ways to make them more successful in that transition into a lunge. Once how he entered is how he exited. You don't have to worry about all the oh, am I in right side, left side? Is it entering, exiting, in the house, out of the house? You got that wired. Now it's just A, B, B. Bow the head. Everyone's good? Going too fast? Not fast enough? Cool. Lift the head, tuck the back toes under. With an inhale, left foot floats up to meet the right. Exhale and fold. Slight nuance here. If you missed it, it's no big deal. Palms come together, and with an inhale, he'll slowly round himself up. Strong core. Exhale. With an inhale, sweep the arms overhead, and as you exhale, forward fold. Inhale, long spine. Exhale, left foot floats back. Now, super simple, straight lunge. Inhale. As you exhale, step back, downward facing dog. Inhale, come forward to plank. As you exhale, lower all the way down, right? From baby cobra to cobra. As you inhale, lift the heart. Keep the hips grounded. That's what keeps cobra cobra. It's what keeps cobra from up dog. So hips stay grounded. Beyond that, explore the back bend. And then slowly lower down. You can keep the knees grounded to modify. Otherwise, tuck the toes, straighten the legs. And at the end of your exhale, press up to plank. Inhale. And as you exhale, lift the hips and push back. That's when I'll say the feet are about 3 to 5 inches apart, heels right behind second and third toes. Little bend in the knees can work to help create a sharper angle at the hips. Thighs are strong. Over time, the heels press down. As you lift the heels, with an inhale, left leg sweeps high. Shift the gaze forward, bring the knee tight to the chest, and step your left foot forward. Strong back leg, then the hips lower. Exhale. With an inhale, right foot floats up to meet your left. And as you exhale, forward fold. Right here, hands to feet. The way it was taught to us way back in the day was it was called half moon with hands to feet. So immediately you'd go right, you'd go left, you'd go back, and you'd get into this pose. Because of the arm position, this is a way deeper experience for your superficial back line than, say, just a regular forward fold or your down dog. So our thought was, because you have the ability to really aggressively, but with arm strength, pull yourself deeper into this superficial backline opener, why don't we pause on it and put it later, right after the step back salutation, so you've had 2 down dogs and 2 forward folds to warm up the superficial backline. Does that make sense? So that's why it's there. So once you're there, the way we set it up is we'll place the hands to the shins or pop up to the fingertips. Why? Just to get some length and some separation between the stomach and the thighs. And then it's immediately bend the knees and glue the stomach to the thighs, the chest to the knees. Place the hands behind the calves. That's the modification. It's just right into it. You don't have to say, you can say that's the modification, or you just teach it and say, to deepen, your hands can slide down the backs of the thighs, backs of the calves towards the heels, cupping the heels if you'd like. So there's actually a progression with the grip itself, modification being calves, deeper being down towards the Achilles, the deepest being cupping the heels. Why? Because now you have way more leverage with that grip to pull to work deeper into the opening, because the arm strength is what's facilitating that. Cool? Now it's a matter of keeping the knees bending to keep the stomach to the thighs, the chest to the knees. And then the way to deepen is to ground the feet to lift the hips. Lifting the hips is what straightens the legs. What you'll find in a lot of your students is they'll want to straighten the legs because they think that's what flexibility is all about. I can straighten my legs. And then their stomach and thighs will separate. The reason we don't want them to do that is it then applies, for some people, too much pressure in the hamstrings and the low back. Remember with a superficial back line, the uniqueness of it is if you bend the knees, it breaks it in a good way and it relieves some of that pressure so we can keep better alignment in the upper torso. You guys remember that from like 8 years ago? Stomach to thighs, chest to knees first. And the reason that's good is it releases that pressure, but it also allows you to work from the belly of the hamstring, like the middle, the meaty part of it, and slowly as you open up and get more flexible out towards the attachments. You will get to the attachments at some point if you get open enough. And you just want to be careful because we talked about it with Beth. If you strain, like especially a high part of the attachment of the hamstring and the ischium, there's not a lot of blood flow that gets to it because it's a tendon that attaches the muscle to the bone. And when it's closer to that bone, it's hard to get that blood flow to help heal it. People have had like high hamstring tears for months and months. Yeah. It's the worst.
Do you ever have that experience as you go? I've had it and it's lasted 2, 3, 4, 5 months before. I've had it a couple times. It's lasted crazy long. But I'll take a strap, and then when I practice, I continue to practice. But I'll take a strap and put it as high up the leg as possible and as tight as I can take it, so it creates a false attachment to the hamstring, so that when I do any folds, it pulls from the strap instead of the attachment, which is helpful because otherwise you re-injure it, and never. It takes forever to do it.
John's mic sounds like it's off again.
Ever had that happen, or your students have that happen? A strap as high up the leg and as tight as they can take it is helpful. So it just creates a false attachment for the hamstring.
Hey, will someone in Zoom unmute yourself? I think I figured it out.
Hello.
And talk. Anyone?
John's mic sounded like it wasn't working anymore again.
Talk, words.
No.
We're talking.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear.
Oh.
Oh, other people said no love. Then you get that iPad game.
All right. Well, Phil's the chosen one.
Oh, shit.
Type something to him and he'll speak for you. Okay, maybe it'll work. If he's working, then I'm assuming.
I will be your voice.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks, Phil.
So enhancement, you guys made that, I was not sure, I don't want to interrupt, but you know, like pretty much like always the last cue is like putting weight into your big toes.
Yeah.
So what is the, not what's the point, but like
It's a good question. What's that? What does that do?
I mean, like,
It's good. When people when they get to that point of straightening the legs, what their tendency is to lock the knees out. And the movement that encourages locking the knees is the weight dumping into the heels.
Everybody stand up real fast. You can feel it. So wake
no,
up.
it's a good cue, like, yeah, I just wasn't sure what.
But it only applies, Amy, to kind of a smaller percentage of people that are able to straighten their legs and still pull.
Yeah.
So just come into a fold.
But we still want them to be protected too.
Come into a fold and just place your hands in front of your toes about, I don't know, 10 inches or so. And what I want you to do is slowly lock the knees. Don't hurt yourself, please. Slowly lock the knees. Just draw the knees back. And then
Straighten the legs the best of your
Yeah,
ability.
straighten the legs and then push into the knees gently. You can imagine you do this a little more aggressively, but notice, and then slide your hands just a little bit closer towards your toes. Notice where your as you lock the knees, where your weight goes. You can feel that? Feel where it goes? Okay, you guys can relax. Now imagine if I was here and my legs were straight, right? And my knees are locked out. Right? So what's happening is the same thing. I start to draw my weight back into my heels more. So if I start to shift that, it can get, it's the idea of shin forward, thighs back, so that I integrate the muscles above and below the knee and support the knee as I'm opening the hamstring. So it's a knee protection cue. Oh, sorry, Chris.
No. Yeah, but because in that with head down and people like, it's easier instead of saying like shins forward, thighs back, just to give them the simple movement that will ensure that happens. Meaning, bring the weight towards the end, bring the weight forward towards the toes.
Sorry, guys, I was muted.
If they do that, the shin muscle's gonna have to light up because that's what it does when you bring the weight forward.
So,
and then you know at that point they're not. It's more probable that they're not dumping into the heels, meaning their knees are not locked out.
Yeah.
So just a little movement forward. That's the idea behind it.
You see the same thing in standing bow. So if standing bow, if I lock my knee out, my weight shifts to my heel. So if I can it's really getting the weight through the corners of the feet, but you can teach that through, bring just a little bit more weight to the ball mounds of the feet, and I can get my weight a little more forward. It takes that locking, the lock knee out of play, so people can keep their knees safe, basically. Cool.
Cool. And then the deepest expression is legs straight, stomach to the thighs, chest to the knees, and face towards the shins. That's that full expression. Cool. When you release, put a little bend in the knees, rotate the palms away, inhale, sweep all the way up. And as you exhale, arms by your sides. That is step one. Super quick, efficient, effective. Right line, lateral lines, front line, back line. And then hands to feet is the deepest expression of that opening of the superficial back line for this sequence. Cool. All right, we're going to pause there and end for tonight, and then we'll wrap up step 2 and 3 tomorrow morning. Cool.
I think we've hit the limit. I feel like everyone's like,
No, I will do it. No, John doesn't want to do awkward pose right now. I will teach it for minutes.
Yes, I do not want to do awkward pose right now.
Yeah,
please no.
And awkward is the first pose of step 2. So give John a break. Oh, I want to teach it. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, you can leave everything. It'll be right here.
Oh yeah. Okay, Jay. So you're in your fold and you want to come back up. I always say put a soft bend in the knees. Spin the palms open. With an inhale, sweep all the way up to standing. And
Hey,
I
Kelly,
literally say that the
would you
exact
mind
same
unmuting
way
and seeing if
every
yours
single
works?
time.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Put a soft bend in the knees.
Awesome.
Spin the palms open.
Yeah, it was me
and
at
with your
first,
inhale,
and then I unmuted
sweep
it
all
like
the way
I-
up to standing.
Whatever it was, I figured it out. So
And you can
anyway,
even
cool.
add arms
Sorry
high
about that,
if you
everybody.
needed to. I usually don't say that piece because people kind of get it. But if you're maybe teaching to a newer crowd, you could say that so that they understand it.
Okay.
You're welcome.
All right. And formally, John, you're taking us out.
All right, let's ground the sit bones and stack the spine. Close the eyes. And we'll share in the breath. Take a long inhale. And a long exhale. Bring your hands to heart center, prayer position. Take a moment to bring into your mind's eye one thing you are grateful for about today. Feeling into that space of gratitude. Seal it with one sound of peace, one Om. Take a big inhale. Namaste. Namaste. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Remember, anyone who's going to be on Zoom tomorrow, grab the new link and the new password. You'll also be sent email.
Cool. And you can leave your stuff. We'll get them to lock up.
All right. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, everybody.